Welcome to WYCD Wicked, that stands for what you can do. It's your old pal Jake, and I am looking forward to tonight. We have got the dumbest doofuses of the Republican Party gathering together to try to convince a bunch of other dumb doofuses to vote for them to be president. They are going to make fools of themselves. But most importantly, what I want to see is the false hope in the eyes of so many of them. We gonna work it out. There we go. The false hope. Because last night, even despite your old pal Jake not being able to stream, somehow America pulled through. Somehow America demonstrated that they have been paying attention. The American people, from just about coast to coast, every election that broke in favor of the Democrats. Even Mississippi, frankly, was more Democrat victory than I would have seen coming. Bashir in Kentucky won re-election. That is a Democrat governor holding their seat in Kentucky. And that's not even, frankly, one of the biggest wins. Funny enough, in my state of Michigan, we had one of the only setbacks, but it was a setback. It was a problem that you want to have. It was a setback from victory. 2 seats now need to be filled again in a new special election, and until that point, we're going to be we no longer have the trifecta. We no longer have the majority in the state Congress. Good Lord, collar. I like this shirt. This is a very comfortable shirt. The collar, however, just one side of it likes to pop over the lapel of a jacket. It's very frustrating because aside from that, it's like a nearly perfect shirt. Updating you in the goings on of my life, having gotten pink eye from a niece, and then pinker eye from dogs, and then just sort of trading off which eye has it as I puppy sit an incontinent dog. It's been a rough 10 or so days. It's been quite tiring. Happy, but tiring. And I'm enjoying recuperating safely back in the void. Oh, my glorious, glorious void. I don't like being in the real world. I like being here in the void, where everything is run like a newsroom. Anti-corporatist, how are you, by the way? Yeah, but let me go back up. I'm seeing some humorous comments here. Yeah, I like the new thumbnail with Pinkerbells. Yes, she's got a lovely one. I love it. Pinkerbell, nice tie, Jake. Well, thank you so much. I like this tie. My dogs are goth. Jake's back at his desk. Yes, home again, home again. And of course, now I get driven into lame coverage. Oh no, AC, I'm sorry. Anti-corporatist, I think, talking about Michigan, saying, yeah, it's just a temporary setback. Agreed. It will be inconsequential. Also, all the major legislation that needed to be passed was passed, so it's fine. It's not irrelevant, but it's not going to be relevant for a long time. And when it is, it's not necessarily a bad thing. Anti-corporatists, again, quite astutely talking about, I believe, Kentucky, Bashir's race. Yeah, but he was running against a creepazoid. All Republicans are horrible monsters. I mean, yeah, his opponent was I don't recall all the scandals, but his opponent was not great. I'll grant that. At the same time, however, I truly cannot think of a Republican candidate for any office, and maybe one exists, but I have not seen them. That is not a monster, like the kind of person that we would not do business with another country with until they were in a jail cell, just to demonstrate that we weren't negotiating with a bunch of savages. Pinkerbell, which all Republicans are. Pinkerbell, the wrong pink. Yeah, it's not been terribly fun, and it's been one of those things where no matter how many times you wash your hands, it doesn't help when the dogs charge through the yard, roll in the fecus, and then do that shake-off thing right in your face. There's just not much you can do except say, well, here we go. Trump endorsed him, says the anti-corporatist, referring to the Kentucky candidate for... Why can't I remember his name anymore? Oh, I know why, because he's irrelevant now. Yeah, Trump endorsed him, and let's hope that Trump also... Cameron, thank you. Let's hope Trump is also done for in the long run. Pinkerbell says, Cameron was already given the opportunity to fail Kentucky. They aren't going to repeat that mistake. Yes. The anti-corporatist Ficus, I had to handle a large amount of dog dung. It's just not been great. My dogs are goth. Yikes, LOL. Yeah. I love that black lab dearly. She is a very good girl, and I will continue going over there to take care of her. I'm just very, very happy that I have had the opportunity to take several consecutive searing hot showers. Long overdue, and I feel about 100,000 times better. It's good. All right, folks. 22 minutes. 22 minutes. I cannot wait. I truly cannot. Now, I'll tell you, after this, I'm going to be on Left Past 10. Looking forward to that. And then after that, I am looking forward to rewatching the Majority Report's live coverage of the debate. And then after that, Brian Tyler Cohen. I want to see what all these people had to say. Simply because I love catching their in the moment reaction to this stuff, especially if Sam Cedars had a honk or two of his own product. I cannot wait. Oh my God, look at that. It truly has been a tiring few days. Let's jump to NBC News coverage. I like NBC News. Let's see what they're saying about the debate. There we go.
We're sitting. We're going to give you a better sense of that later on tonight. Not far from where we are, you saw the audience getting seated here. The moderators are about to get seated. We are getting closer and closer to this kicking off. And as you have heard, the stakes are high.
Oh, very high. Yeah, we're down to, 5 candidates from 7 from the last debate. So much at stake. We're going to hear from the moderators, as you mentioned, as well as from the chair of the RNC. We're just about 20 minutes from the debate. Stay with us. This is a big night for politics, a big night on NBC News Now.
I mean, to be fair, it's a big night for politics in the sense that we're getting an idea of where the nation stands. This, by the way, this is genius, and I want you all to know, or rather, I just want you all to bear witness to this. As I admit, I'm going to steal this thing MSNBC or NBC News does. The little breaks they take with factoids like that, I'm going to try to make those and play those during commercial breaks. because it's interesting. It's just a really great way to summarize the news. Anyway, I've just kicked my camera. It's not just to jump to what they said, it's not really a big night for politics, except that it's a great way to see how cocky the squares are going to be. Nikki Haley, Chris Christie. I want to see how cocky they're going to be after Trumpism was demonstrated to be a failing proposition. Now, it already has been. We already know that it's like the inverse of Biden. People will vote for Biden even though they don't like him all that much, because they want the Democrats in power. They don't even like the Democrats. They just want the Democrats in power because that's the best choice there is. It's the inverse for Republicans. Trump is not... his popularity does not translate well. It just doesn't. At least Biden knows he has no popularity to loan. But Trump's popularity just doesn't translate. All right, let's hear what these raving devils have to say.
Former VP quite well, Mark Short.
I don't really care about these folks. But what use is tonight? Let me tell you. Aside from a measure of where the candidates are after the shellacking Democrats handed out yesterday. Tonight is going to decide who will be the most likely vice presidential pick for a guy who will likely be in jail for the campaign. In other words, when one of these people, if any of them, if it doesn't wind up being Carrie Lake or some other nut job, when one of these people becomes the vice presidential candidate, that is to say, they will be in charge of doing the boring campaign events that Trump can't do because he's too tied up going to court, and then probably by the end of it, serving time. I don't know if you saw how bad it got in the civil fraud trial. The one where I really want to stress, you can start calling Trump a criminal. That's not, it's, at the very least, you can call him, just criminal, really. That there's no defamation associated there. I know it's a civil trial, but he committed fraud. He also committed sexual assault. We're well past the point of being able to call him a criminal. But just to give you a sense of how bad it really is for Trump in these cases, in the civil fraud trial, his daughter testified against him today, and it was brutal. I only caught the highlights, and it was brutal. Whoever winds up being his VP is going to be the Silver Surfer to his Galactus. They're going to be the herald that comes before him, but just for practicality's sake, they're going to be the main person you see at Trump events, at Trump this, that. Whenever there is a barbecue to attend, that'll be the VP candidate's job. Whenever there is a annoying Christian event, and that's not how I would feel about it, that's just how Trump definitely feels about it. VP! They're going. Whenever they have to pretend to give a shit about anything, it's going to be the VP. And Trump, not only will he be unable to attend most of these things, but even the ones he might be able to jet on over to attend, he will say he cannot on account of all the crime stuff he's got to deal with. For the crimes he did. Drinking black coffee tonight, folks. I'm still trying to get that energy back. All right, let's hear what NBC News is saying about these traitors.
Top spot. I think when it comes to foreign policy,
Nah, they're not all traitors, but some of them genuinely are traitors.
Just take a break. We're going to listen to the RNC chair right now who's starting to speak and address the debate.
Case in point.
Particularly excited. In a county, Republicans flipped red for the first time in decades.
Embarrassing.
We have made huge strides with Hispanic voters, and we're going to continue to invest so that we can earn more votes so we can take back the White House in 2024.
We're going to tear down democracy. We've lied to a lot of Hispanics.
I want to thank our RNC debate committee and our RNC
and the devil.
Our debate committee is headed by Dave Bossie and Ann Hathaway. Thank you for all that you've done. Our partners for this debate, NBC News.
Satan.
The very first time ever a Jewish organization is part of a presidential debate as we partner with the Republican Jewish Coalition.
We're going to get genocide done. Genocide, yeah.
RNC members from right here in Florida.
I don't know why Ray Romano
and
is in the crowd.
Mayor Frances Suarez, who is the great mayor of this city.
Oh, hey, did I mention Eric Adams got... Eric Adams is effed. Because he's also a criminal.
To recognize everyone with loved ones in Israel. Our Jewish friends here in the U.S.
I'm not going to play her doing that nonsense. She, like all Republicans, wants genocide. She just wants death and destruction, and she will... The only time a Republican pretends to give about a higher principle is if they can use it as an excuse to do something very low. They are delighted by genocide. Honestly, you know what? Let me throw this at you. If Hamas was just rampaging through another country, and that country did not have the means to stop them, what the Republicans would do is find a way to be on the side of Hamas. And no matter what we said, they would say, we're wrong. We're in the moral wrong. They would say things like, so you're saying you want war? You want the U.S. to get into another 20-year war over there? But it wouldn't be for any reason other than they enjoy death. They enjoy the suffering of others. It's a party of sadists. Yeah, it's a criminal party. That's how they make their living, is thieving from you. But they are able to do that because they don't, where you and I have a lobe in our brain that produces feelings of empathy. What they have is a cackling little gremlin that whispers sinister things to them. They've done autopsies on Republican politicians, and aside from the gremlin lobe, they've also found that where there is supposed to be a heart, there's just a crumpled can of oil, which leaks, not oil, I mean, it's an oil can, but it leaks bile. Just a soupy sort of rich bile substance through their veins. And that's what powers them. And it's what makes the tears of grieving families give them sustenance. That's the anatomy of a Republican politician. My point is, it's ridiculous that any of these monsters are being considered by any Americans. And if you have someone in your life who's trying to decide which Republican will I vote for, make sure they understand that they have no understanding of the world. That person becomes your project. Say, how can you possibly consider any of these monsters? I will now show you the correct way to live. If you've considered, I don't know which candidate is right, but I know for sure all the ones you're considering are very wrong, and it's not terribly hard to pick that out. Imagine if you were trying to pick someone to be the president from a list of fictional characters, and you had like Luke Skywalker, D'Artagnan from the Three Musketeers, Bella from Twilight. You have these people, and then you also have like Jason Voorhees or Smaug the dragon. And you got somebody who's like, I like Voorhees, but I also like Freddy Krueger. I don't know which of the fictional good guys are the correct leader, but obviously the person choosing between Voorhees and Krueger, they're doing it wrong. And congratulations, you have about 1 year to get their head right. I think you can do that mostly by correcting their sources of information. We need to make a collective effort to find and attack right-wing sources of information because they get lied to. Soul Life. Jake could have zoomed in a little more. You son of a bee. All right. Let's deal with it. Let's deal with it now. You rat mother. Hold up. Configure video. Believe it or not, I zoomed out slightly. I go too far. You guys are, I'll be outside the void. That's still pretty zoomed in, isn't it? Yeah. How about this? Huh? Little old-fashioned Hollywood magic. I move away from the camera slightly instead of hunching over like a lunatic. Public utility. Dope virus. Fair enough. Good to see you, public utility, by the by. Environmental Coffee House. Oh, hey, Jake, don't forget to check Discord. I would love to talk about civics, specifically the central process and not the war. It's pretty funny to see all the people and why they were censured. Oh, my God, yeah. Let's talk about that for a second, and I will check Discord. I got to be honest, though, Sandy. Very little chance that I'm going to have a moment to sincerely read through here. Oh, my God. Oof. Yeah, there's a lot of messages. All right. If I get some time in between I'll try, Sandy. I'll try. I may not, but if I show up unprepared, just make fun of me. That's you are welcome to do it. You have my blessing to do so. Let's talk about the censure a little bit. We had a debate about this between Foxy and I on the show, and I ended up begrudgingly conceding with Foxy, like, all right, go ahead, slap her wrist. But I gotta say, I'm angry, nonetheless, that it happened. I'm angry that 22 Democrats thought in the middle of all of this, as our country assists in a genocide. I don't know how else to put it. As we are complicit in the murder of civilians, our country thought, it's a good idea. Let's nitpick. One voice asking us not to murder civilians. Let's parse through everything she said and find one thing that we can skew to mean something worse that we can pretend is a big deal. Moskowitz is one of them, by the way. All of them should be primaried. I would argue that most people should face a primary. I think that should just be part of your... life as a politician, knowing that you'll be primaried. But especially the 22 pathetic Democrats, the 22 worst Democrats we have, apparently. who decided to come after my representative. Motherfucker. This is maybe, my last representative was freaking the CIA gal. I like this one. So I don't like these 22 Democrats. Oh my gosh, Tim Scott is still in this thing? What?
Up to you and Hallie here. This is our first look at the candidates, the way they're going to stand in that position behind the podiums. They've just entered the debate hall.
To a big cheer, it sounded like.
I'll say this: it's a great shot.
Just a couple of rooms over from where we're sitting right now. And listen, this is one of those moments here. They're walking out. We are 4 minutes now from the beginning of this debate. A lot of pressure on each of their shoulders for a variety of different reasons. So far, listen, some of this is about the optics, the smiles, the waves. They're shoulder to shoulder. They're walking over to the corner of the stage together as they go back to take their podiums.
And Noel, I think we've spoken about this before. In the first debate, everyone dressed like Donald Trump. Do you remember that? Everyone had the navy blue suit, the red tie. Here we have a little bit of variety here.
I don't think Haley did.
You know, you work a lot with donors. You need money to run campaigns. If you're out there in the crowd right now, what's the one thing you hope happens if there's a candidate you're buying for?
Well, one of the things that that you want to hear is fixing problems, solutions to problems. And I'll tell you something else that I'll be looking for after the debate
if they actually
is
offer
the momentum
suggestions.
donor. And that's the small donor, because the momentum donor is a movement. That is a voter. Because if for someone, Obama captured that. For someone to give $20, they're going to vote because they don't really probably have that $20 compared to the bundlers that are giving $100,000 to super PACs. So I'm looking for that momentum.
And they'll do it again.
Yep.
Well, the other piece of this, too, I mean, listen, and I've heard, Noel, it's interesting, I've heard from donors, too, who say, yeah, there is a lot on the line here for the people who are looking for that anti-Trump candidate. Is it going to be Ron DeSantis? Is it going to be Nikki Haley looking to tonight? The other piece of this, we haven't touched on it much, but it is the biggest thing that drives voters to the polls, and that is the economy. That is the plan that these Republicans have to help people feel better about their money.
Yeah, Hallie, and especially with the Republican-based inflation, big attack on the Biden administration gets people excited. Everyone's feeling it. But also immigration, which every Republican...
Yeah, the lies they're going to want to hear from Republicans are going to be lies about money. They're also going to want to hear lies about what immigrants do. They really enjoy being terrified of people they've never met, and immigrants are amongst the top groups Republican voters like to be terrified of. But mostly they're going to want to hear lies about money. They're going to want to be lied to about how the economy works, because right now the recovery from all the things Trump did has been slow, and the American people really want the salve of a good lie from a Republican about how they will make it massively better by making it worse.
Arrested, not the other person. It's that kind of mentality, and Donald Trump happens to be the tip of the spear, and he's got the bullet to be that voice for the American people. It's the same thing he did in 2016, where he said, I'm the voice for the voiceless. This is just another issue where he can say, look, they're coming after me, they're coming after you, this has to stop. Elect me, and I can prevent this from happening.
You are seeing that countdown clock in the bottom of your screen right now. We're less than a minute away.
Hogan, Noel, Carlos, we thank you so much. It is about to begin. This has been
I don't
NBC News'
normally
special coverage
go
of the
for
countdown to the
pink
third
dresses.
presidential debate from Miami.
The second this thing is over, Tom and I are going to be back for the post-debate show here in
I don't normally go for pink dresses. I'm not sure I like the outfit that gal has on, but I'll say this: there's potential for that dress. You pair that dress with a sharp jacket, like a light blue jacket. Picture that. Tell me that wouldn't look smart as hell. Add in some comfortable. I don't want the heels, but not high heels, but maybe some low heels. And match those to the jacket, and baby, you got yourself a spiffy outfit. But the dress by itself is too, it's too prom-like, you know? I'm intentionally not playing the audio for this part, because I think that'll get the stream taken down. I literally just turned on the hot water and was staring into it for about 3 minutes. It felt felt really good. Watching my brother's, that ginger wolf I was hanging out with is my brother's dog. My brother was in Italy, and I'm not going to get to the part of this story in time. Anyway, he ran home and snatched up the dog in about 30 seconds. He's the only man on earth, I think, after taking 2 kids over an ocean twice. The only man on earth yesterday night that was more sleepy than I. All right, let's listen to this thing.
And good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Republican presidential debate. I'm Lester Holt, anchor of NBC Nightly News.
Good evening. I'm Kristen Welker, moderator of NBC's Meet the Press.
Hello, I'm Hugh Hewitt, host of Salem Radio's The Hugh Hewitt Show.
We are now just 68 days from the Iowa caucuses when Republican primary voters will begin to determine their party's nominee for president. Tonight, we'll question 5 candidates seeking that nomination on how they're best prepared to be commander-in-chief. And, of course, how best to bring down prices impacting Americans across the country. We have 2 hours for a serious debate on the issues that matter most to Republican voters. Candidates will have 1 minute and 30 seconds for answers and the opportunity for a closing statement. Follow-ups will be at the discretion of all of us at the table, the moderators. Invoking a candidate's name or policy does not necessarily mean the mentioned candidate is entitled to a response. We want to caution all the candidates not to interrupt or speak over your fellow debaters.
Good.
If you talk over each other, the voters can't hear you. And given the critical issues we're facing specifically on the world stage, we want everyone to hear every word you have to say.
Trying to do my
Continued
facial
interruptions
impressions.
may result in loss of additional questions. And to our audience, please hold your applause so that the candidates can be heard. With that said, let's have a good debate. All right, our first question, the opening question, is one for all of you. Donald Trump is the first ex-president in more than 100 years to run for the White House again, and he remains popular among Republican primary voters as his legal challenges mount. Governor DeSantis, let me begin with you on this one. Speak to Republican voters who are supporting Donald Trump. Why should you and not him be the Republican nominee to face Joe Biden a year from now?
This country is in trouble, and the elites that have put us here, they don't care about you. They don't care that you're having to grapple with higher grocery prices or have higher gas prices. They don't care that your family's less secure because of the open border that's allowed drugs and even terrorists to come into this country. Well, I care. I am not going to sit idly by and let this country continue its downward spiral. We need leadership, and we need it now. I'll take the hits, I'll take the arrows, I'll take the slings, because ultimately it's not about me. It's about you.
I
will fight for you.
Come on.
I will make sure
Trump
to
out
lead
specifically.
this country's revival, and I will win for you and your family. Actions speak louder than words. We don't have time for excuses, and it's not something that we're going to be able to have all these distractions. As a veteran, I will get the job done. Now, if you look where we are now, it's a lot different than we were in 2016.
Like an Indian guy who's unsure of something.
And Donald Trump's a lot different guy than he was in 2016. He owes it to you to be on this stage and explain why he should get another chance. He should explain why he didn't have Mexico pay for the border wall. He should explain why he racked up so much debt. He should explain why he didn't drain the swamp. And he said Republicans were going to get tired of winning. Well, we saw last night, I'm sick of Republicans losing. In Florida, I showed how it's done. 1 year ago here, we won.
If he wasn't whining, it'd be so powerful.
A massive landslide right here in Miami-Dade County. That's how we have to do it. So I promise you this, as the nominee, next November, I'll get the job done. And as president, I will deliver
your time is up. Let me turn to Ambassador Haley.
That was an actually good response.
Let me turn to Ambassador Haley. Why
and
you
great
and not
by
the
the moderator for saying,
Well, I
and
think
you're
you
done.
look at the fact that we're almost $34 trillion in debt. 60% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. 50% of American families can't afford
This
diapers.
is good.
1 in 6 American families can't pay their utility bills. You have
No. Pretty please with sugar on top. Baby, I'm begging you. Oh. Oh.
I think you look at the fact we're almost $34 trillion in debt. 60% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. 50% of American families can't afford diapers. 1 in 6 American families can't pay their utility bills. You have the fact that he used to be right on Ukraine and foreign issues. Now he's getting weak in the knees and trying to be friendly again. I think that we've got to go back to the fact that we can't live in the past. We can't live in other headlines. We've got to start focusing on what's going to make America strong and proud.
They're
And that's
tearing
what I'm
him to
focused
shreds
on
this
doing.
time.
Let's make sure we pay down our debt. I think we need an accountant in the
Good.
White House. Let's make sure that we have transparency in the classroom. As a mom, I know what that means. Let's make sure we secure our borders so that our families are safe. Let's get crime down because our families want to know that they can be safe no matter where they go. And as the wife of a combat veteran, I will tell you, a military needs to know we have our back, and we need to make sure that America is strong.
Ambassador, thank you very much.
I would love it if somebody actually had military experience or a spouse with military experience and they didn't mention it. That would actually impress me.
Important issues, and the voters want and need to hear them. Mr. Ramaswamy, let me turn to you. Please make your case. Why should you be the nominee and not the former president?
I think there's something deeper going on in the Republican Party here, and I am upset about what happened last night. We've become a party of losers at the end of the day. It was a cancer in the Republican establishment. Let's speak the truth. I mean, since Ronna McDaniel took over as chairwoman of the RNC in 2017, we have lost 2018, 2020.
Now, I thought they were all going after Trump because of that, of the losses last night. It looks like that ain't wrong. That definitely hit their little campaigns planning. But Ramaswamy's saying, I'm going to blame everybody but Trump, and that's how I'm going to be VP.
This debate, this should be Tucker Carlson, Joe Rogan, and Elon Musk. We'd have 10 times the viewership, asking questions that GOP primary voters actually care about and bringing more people into our party. You think the Democrats, and we've got Kristen Welker here, do you think the Democrats would actually hire Greg Gutfeld to host a Democratic debate?
No.
They wouldn't do it. And so the fact of the matter is, I mean, Kristen, I'm going to use this time because this is actually about you in the media and the corrupt media establishment. Ask you, the Trump-Russia collusion hoax that you pushed on this network for years.
No, it wasn't a hoax.
Was that real, or was that Hillary Clinton made
No, it was real.
Information?
No, it was real.
Answer the question. Go.
Mr. Ross.
Pathetic.
This is how we get our country back. We need accountability because this media rigged the 2016 election.
He's doing a great job. He's just doing a great job of the kind of bullshit that's necessary for him to get, a really good podcast out of all this, like a really successful psychopath podcast.
Let's not do this. Let's let the candidates speak. Governor Christie, why you and not former President Trump?
Well, Lester, look.
All right.
You said.
I think he's going to get booed before he finishes.
We are dealing with extraordinarily important issues facing this country right now. We have our greatest ally in the Middle East under fire from a terrorist group that has committed to wiping them and every Jewish person in this world off the map. We have Ukraine with Vladimir Putin, a communist KGB dictator who wants to put the old man back together. He's starting in Ukraine, and he's going to move to the Baltics and Poland after that. We have inflation in this country that is choking every American family that wants to try to rise up and give their children a better life. And tonight, we need to decide which president is going to be the one to tackle the big issues, who's going to make this country look once again, not just inward, but look outward at the world and say America is the country, the indispensable nation that makes this a safer world. And in a safer world, American innovation, American hard work has always been the thing that has driven our country to greater things. I'm going to be the president who will do those big things. We're not going to be small, and I'll say this about Donald Trump. Anybody who's going to be spending the next year and a half of their life focusing on keeping themselves out of jail and courtrooms cannot lead this party or this country, and it needs to be said plainly.
Governor, thank you. Let me turn to Senator Scott. Senator Scott, you've said former President Trump can't win. Make your case to Republican voters.
Well, certainly. What I would say without any question is that the truth of my life
destroys the lies of the radical left. We need a president and a candidate who will actually help our base solidify and attract independent voters into our party. The Great Opportunity Party is now winning back African-American voters and Hispanic voters because we are working on a foundation based on faith. Our nation is facing some deep challenges. It is the loss of faith in this nation that is a part of the erosion that we're seeing every single day. It's restoring faith, restoring our Christian values that will help this nation once again become the city on the hill. When Ronald Reagan talked about the city on the hill,
blah, blah, blah. Okay, so look, Christie didn't get booed. I'll say this. He also made a strong pitch to big business. When he said American innovation it doesn't matter what he said after that, because that's Republican talk for, hey, big business, cut me a check, and I'll get you back with 10,000% interest in terms of unfair rules you will get to be oligarchs with.
Without that focus, none of the issues, the policies,
I do
matter.
Love that Southern
We
accent.
have to get back to being
None
a
of the
nation
issues.
that is, in fact, the city on the hill, that believes in each other enough for us to fight
Scott,
for that future.
Senator Scott, thank you. We're going to turn now to the challenges facing the next commander-in-chief. You'll all be fielding questions first from me and the Republican Jewish Coalition, and then from Kristen and Hugh. So as we continue forward, the Israel-Hamas war is barely a month old. Tonight, Israeli troops are fighting inside Gaza City with over 200 hostages who remain captive there, and civilian casualties mount inside Gaza.
To get depressed.
As President of the United States, what would you be urging Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to do at this moment? Governor DeSantis.
I would be
some
telling
ideas.
Bibi, finish the job once and for all with these butchers, Hamas. They're terrorists. They're massacring innocent people. They would wipe every Jew off the globe if they could. He cannot live with that threat right by his country. That Hamas should release every hostage and they should unconditionally surrender. I'm sick of hearing the media. I'm sick of hearing other people blame Israel just for defending itself. We will stand with Israel.
No, they're blaming Israel for a genocide that they're doing
and I can tell you,
right
as
now.
governor, I actually did something about it.
Since this
Biden's
broadcast
neglect has been
started,
atrocious.
they've killed
we had Floridians that
about
were over
12
there
kids,
after the attack.
children.
He left them stranded.
Dead.
They couldn't get flights out. So I scrambled resources in Florida.
It's like
I sent
that.
planes over to Israel, and I brought
I
back
couldn't
over
get in on that
700
genocide
people
fast
to
enough.
safety. There could have been more hostages had we not acted. And I'll tell you this, I met the first plane load when they came to Florida, and one of the mothers pointed to a 6-year-old daughter, and she said, my daughter had been saying the last 2 nights, Mommy, I don't want to hear any more bombs, no more rockets. I just want to get back to Florida. So there's a difference between words and deeds. We acted and we saved lives.
Thank you. Ambassador Haley, what would you do? What would you be urging Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to do? Would you consider humanitarian pause, for example?
The first thing I said to him when it happened was I said, finish them. Finish them. And the reason is I worked on this every day when I was at the United Nations. And we have to remember that they have to, 1, eliminate Hamas, 2, support Israel with whatever they need, whenever they need it, and 3, make sure we bring our hostages home. We need to be very clear-eyed to know there would be no Hamas without Iran. There would be no Hezbollah without Iran. There would not be the Houthis without Iran. And there wouldn't be the Iranian militias in Syria and Iraq that are trying to
Qatar. That's where the leadership of Hamas is hiding.
For Iran. And who is funding Iran right now? China is buying oil from Iran. Russia is getting drones and missiles from Iran. And there is an unholy alliance. We need to be clear-eyed. The last thing we need to do is to tell Israel what to do.
I do personally need to be literally
clear-eyed. The only thing we should be doing is supporting them and eliminating Hamas. It is not that Israel needs America. America needs Israel.
Not so. I would love it. Number one, if AIPAC was just no longer a thing. But more to the point, I would love it if the moderators would mention Palestinian civilians.
One step further, the founding vision of Israel was based on the idea that they don't want to depend on anybody else's sympathy or direction in defending themselves. So what I would tell Bibi is that Israel has the right and the responsibility to defend itself. I would tell him to smoke those terrorists on his southern border, and then I'll tell him as President of the United States, I'll be smoking the terrorists on our southern border. That's his responsibility. This is our responsibility. That's how we move forward. But I want to be careful to avoid making the mistakes from the neocon establishment of the past. Corrupt politicians in both parties spent trillions, killed millions, made billions for themselves in places like Iraq and Afghanistan, fighting wars that sent thousands of our sons and daughters, people my age, to die in wars that did not advance anyone's interests, adding $7 trillion to our national debt. And Joe Biden sold off our foreign policy. Joe Biden's son, Hunter Biden, got a $5 million bribe from Ukraine. That's why we're sending
all of this would be, until he got to the conspiracy talk, that line about the millions and the billions and the yada yada would have been a lot more effective if he hadn't just said that he was going to smoke the terrorists at our southern border, by which, of course, translated from slang, means kill the immigrants. These are the worst humans that the United States is capable of putting up for anything. Just the worst.
Well, number one, I would tell...
Let's hear that again.
Scott,
yes.
In case we've got two of them on stage tonight.
Ramaswamy, thank you. Senator,
what was that line?
Generation is going to put this country first, or do you want Dick Cheney in 3-inch heels?
All right, Mr.
In which case we've got two of them on stage tonight.
Ramaswamy, thank you.
Ooh, burn.
Senator Scott.
Yes.
Oh,
Senator
two
Scott,
of them. Oh
question
my
to you.
God, I just caught
You're
up
the
with
president,
that.
You're on the phone in the Oval Office with the Prime Minister. You tell him what?
Well, number one, I would tell Prime Minister Netanyahu, not only do you have the responsibility and the right to wipe Hamas off of the map,
Ramaswamy's got the lines.
We will be there with you.
you.
We'll stand shoulder to shoulder. There will be no daylight. But I would change the station a little bit, though, and head back home to America. I would say to President Biden, diplomacy only is a weak strategy. Appeasement leads to war. From President Obama to President Biden, Obama sent millions to Iran. Frankly, President Biden has sent billions to Iran. That is why I've said that there's blood dripping from the hands of President Obama and President Biden. I would tell President Biden with great clarity, if you want to stop the 40+ attacks on military personnel in the Middle East, you have to strike in Iran. If you want to make a difference, you cannot just continue to have strikes in Syria on warehouses. You actually have to cut off the head of the snake, and the head of the snake is Iran and not simply their proxies. In order for us to have a powerful response from America, we have to be in a position of strength. As President of the United States, my foreign policy is simple. You cannot negotiate with evil. You have to destroy it.
All right, Senator Scott, thank you. Governor Christie, I want to get you to weigh in here.
Look, Lester, these problems are so big and serious that the first thing I would say to Prime Minister Netanyahu is pretty simple. America is here, no matter what it is you need at any time, to preserve the state of Israel. Remember that Hamas's main goal is to get rid of Israel.
This is a more nuanced answer.
Is to get Israel absolutely off the map. Now, there are three things I think I would say to him when he asked for advice. The first I would say is that it is absolutely your obligation to protect the territorial integrity of Israel. Secondly, to make sure you protect the security and the safety of your people. Every time something happens to compromise either one of those things, it creates greater unrest in the entire region. Second, you must go in and make sure that Hamas can never do this again. The fact is that
I'm actually okay with
Israel
that.
and their intelligence community failed. They failed here, and they failed the people of the state of Israel. And
Depending
so we need to
on what he
work
actually
closely and
means.
better together to make sure, one, that they're degraded, and two, that we know everything that's going on inside the Gaza Strip when it's going on, so that something like this can't happen to kill 1,400 individuals again. And the third thing is to keep your eye on the ball. Make sure that we continue to isolate Iran, work with the reasonable nations in the Middle East, the other Arab nations who want to partner with you, and make sure that we continue to isolate Iran so that their only friends in the world are the part of the evil foursome, China.
It is very important that we take note of the fact that nobody mentioned Palestinians.
The CEO of the Republican Jewish Coalition, a partner of the Republican National Committee in this debate.
Not one of them. Which means it's important.
Given attacks by Iranian.
Which means it's important to their constituents, the people they want to please. It's very important to them that no mercy at all, no humanity at all, be shown to the Palestinian people. Thank God we outnumber them, because we need to, in my opinion, we need to take the opinions that the Republican voters have and just do the opposite. If it pleases Republican let's say politicians, if it pleases MAGA voters or Republican politicians, that is strong evidence that we should be doing the opposite. All right, let's hear whatever this nonsense is.
Backed proxy groups on U.S. military bases in Syria and Iraq, attacks that have wounded approximately 24 of our U.S. servicemen. Do you support the use of military force by the United States against Iran?
Governor Haley, would you please answer that?
Yes, I'd first like to say they're 5-inch heels, and I don't wear them unless you can run in them.
Two
of you on stage. The second thing that I will
and Ramaswamy rubbing it in.
Our heels are not for a fashion statement, they're for ammunition. What we need to be doing for Iraq and Syria is, first of all, the idea that our men and women could be targeted and that we've allowed almost 100 hits to happen under Biden's watch is unthinkable. We need to understand this is Iran giving the green light, telling them what to do, and we shouldn't be doing the tit for tat like what Joe Biden has done. We need to go and take out their infrastructure that they are using to make those strikes with so they can never do it again. Iran responds to strength. You punch them one and you punch them hard and they will back off. But what we don't need is Biden falling all over himself to get back in the Iran deal. Him giving $6 billion to get 5 hostages home. Him telling Netanyahu now that he needs a pause or a ceasefire. We don't need him going and sitting there tiptoeing around Iran because he thinks they're going to do something. You don't respond to an enemy and a terrorist with fear. You respond with strength. When you do that, that's when the world pays attention, and that's when Iran stops.
Thank you. Governor DeSantis, if I can continue with you. Just today, the U.S. launched another one of its limited airstrikes against targets in Syria, this time Iranian-linked facility. How far would you go militarily to hold Iran accountable?
Well, first, Matt, thanks for your question, and I appreciate what you've done over the last month. I know it's been very difficult for the community, and appreciate you guys rallying together in difficult times. I actually served in Iraq back in the day, and we had al-Qaeda in Iraq. You had Shia militias that were funded by Iran that were killing hundreds and hundreds of U.S. troops. And as commander-in-chief, I am not going to put our troops in harm's way unless you're willing to defend them with everything you have. Biden has them out there. They're sitting ducks. He's doing glancing blows. That's just inviting more attacks from the Iranians. I would say you harm a hair on the head of an American service member, and you are going to have hell to pay. We are not just going to sit there and let our service members be sitting ducks, and that's true whether it's Iran or whether it's any country on the world. We have to be strong, and we have to defend the people who defend us.
All right, thank you, Governor. Now our second and final question from Matthew Brooks of the Republican Jewish Coalition. Please watch.
Jewish students across the country are threatened and under attack. What do you say to Jewish students on college campuses who feel unsafe given the dramatic rise in anti-Semitism? And what do you say to university presidents and college presidents who have not met the moral clarity moment to forcefully condemn Hamas terrorism?
Mr. Ramaswamy, would you like to take that one?
Absolutely. I think the scourge of anti-Semitism across this country, including at places like my alma maters and places like Brooklyn Bridge in New York, it's sad to see, but here's what history teaches us. Anti-Semitism is a symptom of a deeper cancer in a country and a society that is lost, and we are lost. Several years ago, when I wrote my first book, Woke Inc., I was talking about they were chanting death to America, death to white people, death to Christians. Nobody was waking up back then. Now it's even bad. Now they're saying death to Israel and worse. So it is wrong, but we have to get to the root cause here. Now, I think it's really important that we do this through leadership, not censorship. Leadership means fill that void with purpose and meaning. Dilute this wokeism and anti-Semitism.
When you have already
These
waken
kids,
up.
they have no idea what the heck they're even talking about. When they're siding with Hamas over Israel, they are fools. But I also want to caution here, if we go the direction of Ron DeSantis or Nikki Haley, with whom I respectfully disagree on this issue, pro-censorship, telling student groups to disband, mark my words, soon they will say if you question a vaccine and its side effects, you're a bioterrorist. Soon they will say that if you show up at a school board meeting, you're a domestic terrorist. Soon if they say that J6 prisoners should be released, you're an insurrectionist terrorist. So that's where this road ends. We don't quash this with censorship because that creates a worse underbelly.
So, what is it you call? He said he wrote a book called Woke Inc., decrying woke people, I assume. What is it called? He said people haven't woken up yet. What is it called? You understand what I'm saying. My eyes are on fire.
Let me just say to every single university president in America, federal funding is a privilege, not a right. Number one.
Uh-oh.
Two,
that's a serious problem.
student
Thankfully, he will not be
on a visa to a college
in this
campus,
much longer
your
after
visa
tonight.
is a privilege, not a right. Number three, any campus that allows for anti-Semitism and hate, to allow students to encourage terrorism, mass murder, and genocide, you should lose your federal funding today, period. To all the students on visas who are encouraging Jewish genocide, I would deport you from those campuses. We have to stand strong with our Jewish Americans. At the end of the day, we should not have our Jewish students in a library being told to hide. On our streets in New York, a Jewish citizen has the right to walk on the streets of America with no fear. They
There's
have
an
the
echo
right to go to college campuses, go to
in his
class,
audio.
and not fear.
Poor guy.
We will restore that. I started working
If you hear
on anti-Semitism
his
on college
speech sounds
campuses
stilted,
in
that's not his fault. That's
2017,
because there's an
even
echo, and he
then,
can hear
there was a
himself
rise
talking
of
at a delay.
anti-Semitism
That actually does
on
F
college
with you.
campuses.
It's almost
We must
impossible to have a whole
force the
sentence come out of your
people
mouth like
off
that.
those campuses. And
But he's
frankly,
an evil man.
Thank you.
so
Let me
I don't really care.
let me turn to the Governor DeSantis here. What do you think about what he just said?
I was the first presidential candidate to say, if you are here on a student visa as a foreign national, you're making common cause with Hamas, I'm canceling your visa and I'm sending you home. No questions asked. Second, I have friends here in Florida
Making common cause?
their kids do not feel safe even going to university.
If you dare say that we can't kill all the Palestinian kids that we want, then you're a terrorist and you're going to go home, and that's all there is to it. I don't know why my Ron DeSantis is essentially a worse version of Katharine Hepburn, but it is. That's the vibe I get off him. If Katharine Hepburn had her class, like her classiness, inverted. Let's see what he's babbling about.
The Jewish students who
He's babbling about the Jewish students. Okay.
to combat so-called Islamophobia. No, it's the anti-Semitism that's spiraling out of control. That is what we have to confront. And as president,
no,
I
it is
can
not.
tell you this. We are not going to stand for this on college.
Hell, I would be delighted to have, for once, some of these folks combat anti-Semitism. I'd love them to just denounce neo-Nazis.
6-year-old Palestinian American
Oh, but that's
boy
their base. So
was
they can't.
killed in Illinois by his landlord. His mother was also stabbed more than a dozen times.
First
And what
mention
has
of
been
a
charged
Palestinian
as a hate
child that
crime.
I have heard.
What do you say to Muslim Americans who are also feeling afraid for their safety right now?
Lester, I'm the only one on the stage who's actually had experience in dealing with this. I was appointed by President Bush to be the U.S. Attorney in New Jersey on September 10th, 2001. And when I took over that job after the September 11th attacks, I had to deal with a situation in our state that was explosive. We're the most ethnically diverse state in this country. And so first, we heard credible reports about Jewish students and synagogues being threatened in our state in the aftermath of 9/11. We made sure that we sent federal agents to those synagogues and we protected them, and the same thing should be being done now. At the very same time, I personally went from mosque to mosque in New Jersey and met with the leaders of those mosques and
I threw a brick at each and every one of them.
Law enforcement is on your side to protect you, regardless of your religion.
Good for him if he did that.
You are going to comply with the law.
He's a Republican, so I assume he's lying. But if he's not, good for him.
With Muslim Americans all across the state of New Jersey, and we stopped any hate crimes that were going on either against Jewish Americans in New Jersey or Muslim Americans in New Jersey. It takes leadership, Lester, to know how to do this. You must work with both sides. Both sides need to know it, but let us never have a false moral equivalence between Hamas and Hezbollah and the Jewish people. The Jewish people stand for right and justice, and Hamas and Hezbollah stand for death.
Governor Christie, thank you. Ambassador Haley, what do you say to Americans who are simply afraid right now in this current environment that we're talking about?
I think, you look at the country, and the country is all out of sorts. I think, look at what these kids are dealing with on college campuses. What makes me so angry is not only do you have the kids barricaded in the library, they've said they were going to shoot up the kosher dining hall. You've got kids' dorm rooms who are being set on fire because they have something related to Israel on their doors. No person should ever feel in danger like this. And this is what I would say about our college presidents, is if the KKK were doing this, every college president would be up in arms. This is no different. You should treat it exactly the same. Anti-Semitism is just as awful as racism, and we've got to make sure they're protected. And for everybody that's protesting on these college campuses in favor of Hamas, let me...
All right, I'm cutting her off because she is lying to you. Nobody is protesting in favor of Hamas. They are protesting in favor of sparing Palestinian civilians. There is a difference between Hamas and Palestinian civilians, and it is in her and all of their interests to make you confused about that, but it's not confusing. She's just a bigot. Go fuck yourself, Nikki Haley.
Live in fear because some other terrorist activity says they want to destroy them.
Ambassador, thank you. Kristen.
Lester, thank you. This is another question for the entire field, so you will all get a chance to respond. But Senator Scott, I'd like to start with you. The United States has given Ukraine financial and military support since the war began more than 600 days ago.
Let's find out who's bought by Putin.
President Zelensky told me on Sunday, if Russia isn't stopped now, quote, the price will be higher for the United States, and Americans would be forced to, quote, send your sons and daughters to defend NATO countries. Senator Scott, where do you stand on more funding for Ukraine?
I certainly have been very supportive of Ukraine. I believe that ultimately we should make sure that the President of the United States states what is America's national vital interest in Ukraine. It is actually in degrading the Russian military. We've been very effective using our resources and our weaponry and the incredibly high price of Ukrainian blood to achieve that objective. Every day we get closer to the degradation of the Russian military, and that's good news. But the American people are frustrated that they do not have a president who reminds us and tells us, where's the accountability? Where are those dollars? How are those dollars being spent? We need those answers for us to continue to see the support for Ukraine. And at the same time, I would say that a package that's been offered by the president for Ukraine and Israel, that's the wrong approach. We need to focus specifically on providing Israel with the $14 billion
that's an anti-Ukraine stance,
so that
folks.
we show the world that we are 100% undeniably standing shoulder to shoulder with Israel. And then as we turn away from that direct support for Israel, we should go to our southern border and close our southern border with the resources necessary. I believe that we have sleeper terrorist cells in America. Thousands of people have come from Yemen, Iran, Syria, and Iraq. If we are going to deal with the national security emergency at our border, we have to do it now.
Ain't it
Scott,
funny
but just
that
to
it's
be
never the
very
northern
clear,
border?
If you were president, if you were in the Oval Office today, would you sign off on more military funding for Ukraine, or would you discontinue it?
Bottom line is we have to first have the level of accountability that allows the American people to understand where the resources have gone. Number one. Number two, after we have that responsibility taken care of and accountability, then we have an opportunity to look at the overall strategy that helps us degrade the Russian military while we use our resources and, frankly, keeping our NATO partners safe from the Russian military is absolutely essential. As you understand, Article 5 would require to support and to defend NATO, our troops on the ground. The fastest way for us to eliminate that possibility is for us to destroy, to the extent possible, the Russian military. By doing so, we actually achieve the objective
He is not
of
wrong
keeping
here.
our military home. And that's good news.
Thank you, Senator Scott. Mr. Ramaswamy, are you persuaded by President Zelensky's urgent new plea? Where do you stand on more funding?
I'm absolutely unpersuaded. And I'm actually enjoying watching the Ukraine hawks quietly, delicately tiptoe back from their position as this thing has unwound into a disaster. The first half of this race, I was the only person standing for it. Now they're actually quietly coming around to being more cautious, as they should. Level with the American people here. Ukraine is
Unwound into a disaster. Listen, well, he bullshits. Let me tell you the reality. The best case scenario for the United States of America is not actually what I want. The best case scenario for U.S. interests is an indefinite war in Ukraine. Make Ukraine like Afghanistan, basically. Drag it out as long as we possibly can. Trickle in just enough funding to keep the Ukrainians fighting Russia forever. That's what's best for the U.S. What's best for humanity is a load of money and all the equipment we possibly can get, and basically anything Ukraine needs to boot Russia out. And the worst thing for humanity is that Russia takes over Ukraine and begins a new era on Earth where it is now established that it will be allowed for large imperialist countries to use anything short of nukes to take over everybody who does not have nukes. And that will be the case because Ukraine is the test bed for that. Ukraine gave up their nukes because we promised we'd protect them.
Ukraine. I am telling you, Putin and President Xi are salivating at the thought that someone like that could become president. They would love
She's
to
right.
do that.
Yep.
So this is what I will tell you.
We're driving Russia into China's hands because of these foolish policies.
You had your time to talk. The ambassador has the floor.
Thank
Ambassador,
you. The
please.
first thing I'll tell you is we all remember what that thug did when he invaded Ukraine. We all know that 500,000 people have died because of Putin. And here is a freedom-loving, pro-American country that is fighting for its survival and its democracy. No, I don't think we should give them cash. I think we should give them the equipment and the ammunition to win. And I'll tell you, if Biden had done it when they first asked for it, this war would be over. But let's also remember this. When you left Afghanistan in shambles and left them with a ton of weapons and money, it's not that we left, it's how we left. When you look at Ukraine, don't think for a second, now everybody wants to move away from Ukraine. They'll want to move away from Israel a year from now. America can never be so arrogant to think we don't need friends. After 9/11, we needed a lot of friends. Now is the time to get partnerships. This unholy alliance between Russia, Ukraine, and China is real. There is a reason that Taiwanese want us to support
I don't
the
like
Ukrainians.
how she's getting
it's
to
because
this
they know
position
that China's coming after them next.
by saying
There is a
unholy
reason
alliance over and
Ukrainians
over.
want us to support Israelis.
But the
because
fact
they
is,
know that if
of all the
Iran
people
wins,
on the
Russia
stage there,
wins.
the
We have
least
to see
death
the combination of the three.
happens under
Ambassador,
Haley's
Governor
plan.
Christie,
Until we
what
get to
is
Christie.
your
I think
take?
actually Christie might be
And
better.
how long should Americans be expected to help fund the war in Ukraine?
Kirsten, let's remember the last time that we turned our back on a shooting war in Europe. It bought us just a couple of years. And
True.
then 500,000 Americans were killed in Europe to defeat Hitler. This is not a choice.
He's not wrong.
This is the price we pay for being the leaders of the free world. And the fact is, this alliance is not just with Russia and China. Governor Haley knows this. Iran is in the middle of this as well, and so is North Korea. And they are all working to support Russia right now. And the reason they're doing it is because dictators work together. People who believe in democracy work together. We must stand with all of those that are standing up for democracy and freedom in this world. And by the way, let's remind everybody of this. In 1992, this country made a promise to Ukraine. We said if you return nuclear missiles that were part of the old Soviet Union to Russia and they invade you, we will protect you. An American promise that's 31 years old is no different than an American promise that's made tonight on this stage. We need to stand by it. And those of us who forget history are doomed to repeat it. And
I'd like to respond.
And the absolute giving in to dictators, which is being suggested on this stage, just shows the immaturity of the approach.
Boom.
I'd like to
Governor
respond.
Christie, thank you. Governor DeSantis,
Keep hitting
I'd
him
like
with
you
that.
to weigh in on this idea. Are you concerned that this could become a wider war if Putin is not stopped now?
Well, any suggestion by Zelensky or anyone else that we're going to eventually have U.S. troops there, I can tell the American people when I'm president that will not happen. We are not going to send your sons and daughters to Ukraine. I am going to send troops to our southern border. If you look at the threats
What
that
an
we
asshole.
face, terrorists have come in through our southern border. I'm going to shut it down. I'm going to have the military, and I'm going to deport the people who've come, particularly under Biden, who've come from.
We really need to be concerned about this talk. It seems like Republican pollsters have just decided that you can start saying that immigrants are terrorists.
The media repeat that. When you look at it, what most of the money is money to process more illegal aliens into this country. How is that solving the problem? That's making the problem worse. And what does he do for?
And every immigrant is an illegal alien if they're brown, according to this guy.
Europeans to step up and do their fair share. And we need to get serious about the top threat that this country faces, which is the Chinese Communist Party.
So if I may respond to the Ukraine question.
In fact, we are going to go from the hot wars in Ukraine and Gaza and Israel to what many people are calling the new Cold War with China. And I remind the audience that it's important for our visitors at home.
The only thing they want to change about that is that it's cold.
Beijing to hear you. Many Republicans believe that the Chinese Communist Party and General Secretary Xi is an existential threat to the United States. The flashpoint is Taiwan. For decades and decades, the American military, but primarily the United States Navy, has deterred an attack from China to the island state of Taiwan. But Ronald Reagan's Navy of 600 ships is gone. Now, the question to you is, and I'll start with you, Ambassador Haley, because you were in President Trump's cabinet. His goal was a 355-ship Navy. That's what he pushed for. He got to 300. It's now...
Mystical AI says, how are they illegal immigrants if they completed the paperwork to be... what did he say? How are they illegal if they completed processing? The answer, my friend, is they are brown.
291. Is that big enough to deter
and these
if
are
necessary, defeat
who
an
are
invasion
bigots.
of Taiwan?
China has the largest naval fleet in the world. They have 350 ships. They'll have 400 ships in 2 years. We won't even have 350 ships in 2 decades. China has built up their military. It's not just land, air, and sea. They're doing cyber. They're doing artificial intelligence. They're doing space. America needs...
All right, let's
We need to do everything we can. The first thing is you go and you make sure you have the backs of Ukraine. That's why the Taiwanese want us to support Ukraine, because they know that sends the biggest message to China. The second thing is we go to China and we start being tough on them. No more sales of our American soil to China, and let's take back what they've already stolen.
I'm fine with
then
that,
you go and
actually.
you to the universities. No more having millions of dollars go to our universities. Then we will go and end all formal trade trade relations with China until they stop murdering Americans from fentanyl, something Ron has yet to say that he's going to do. And then we modernize our military. When we strengthen our military, when we modernize it with the focus of cyber, artificial intelligence, and space, when we make sure that we have the backs of our friends, whether it's in Israel, whether it's in Ukraine, and we should be arming Taiwan. Make sure they have the equipment they need. Make sure they have the training they need now. There's nothing China fears more than knowing that America will...
Okay, let me just clarify one thing about the Navy. There's a whole world of difference between quality and quantity when it comes to the number of naval vessels you have out there, or rather when it comes to naval strength. Just understand that what she said is nonsensical, especially if you're in the U.S. Navy. You would prefer to be having your armaments than what China's got.
Authoritarianism all around the world as the cost of doing business. They will impose things like social credit scores and internet monitoring. So this is, to this generation, what the Soviet Union was to the post-World War II generation. I've already released a plan. We're going to get to 355 ships at the end of the first term, 385 ships at the end of the second term, but we're going to have a path to 600 ships over the next 20 years. I think the future of freedom is going to be determined in the Indo-Pacific. We have a strategy not just military, but decoupling from the economy and fighting them here at home with their cultural. You know, Ambassador Haley said somehow I wasn't doing. She welcomed them into South Carolina, gave them land near a military base, wrote the Chinese ambassador a love letter saying what a great friend they were. That was like their #1 way to do economic development. In Florida, I banned China from buying land in this state, and we kicked out on our universities, and we kicked the Confucius Institutes out of our universities. We've recognized the threat, and we've acted swiftly and decisively.
Senator Scott, you've been in the Congress since 2011. Defense spending has fallen over that entire period of time. Where are we going to get the money, and what would you build, and what kind of ships to deter China from attacking Taiwan?
Well, two major problems with the question.
I don't know
Number
why
one,
he's getting
we
that
do not
number.
have currently
It hasn't fallen. It's
defense
risen.
industrial bank to allow
Consistently.
us to
Even in
have the kind
peacetime.
of production that we need in order to keep America safe. Frankly, if we are not prepared to fight and engage in 3 continents at the same time, think about where we are today. In the Middle East, we are in the midst of trying to back our strongest ally. In Eastern Europe, we're seeing our resources and our weaponry help degrade the Russian military. The Indo-Pacific, we have real challenges. The long-term threat is China. Immediate threat is our southern border. In order for us to have the military to fight 3 different continents at the exact same time, we're going to have to invest heavily in our military, but we're also going to have to invest heavily in an industrial base so that we can hit our objectives from a military perspective, not only with our ships, but also with our planes. We are so...
You want to know where these people get their money from? The people that make these killing machines that they're pretending like we need. We could literally buy not a single additional piece of military hardware, and we could take on basically any 3 countries in the world forever. I mean, we have an obscene military.
What would you build? Where would you build it? When would they
Too many
be in the
toys
water?
already.
How big would the fleet get?
First answer is end the toxic divest to invest program. For people who don't know about that, we're decommissioning ships in the South China Sea. The foundation of war is economics. Rebuild our defense industrial base at home. But here's the dirty little secret. Our actual defense industrial base depends on China for the supply chain, for the F-35 jets, for the ships that we're building. Think about this. Why are we stockpiling that if it isn't to actually be strong against our enemy, China? We depend on them for that. Just like we depend on them for pharmaceuticals, just like we depend on them for semiconductors. So here's why we can't get tough with China. It's because we depend on them for our modern way of life. And we have to declare economic independence from our enemy. That's the Declaration of Independence that Thomas...
And why? Why do we depend on them? Because it's a world economy, and it has been for 20 years. And when I said earlier that it's simply a nonsensical thing to say that we totally divest from China, it's because it's a nonsensical thing. They're just trying to pick a fight with China. They're trying to talk tough, but they know they can't actually do anything because both of these countries are just too big to fight each other directly. Because if either country won, the next month they would be in utter poverty. If China wiped us all out tomorrow, then come December, they would be broke. And vice versa would be true as well.
Play by the same set of rules.
Ramaswamy,
you're kicked out of the WTO, and you actually have to have accountability for the COVID-19 pandemic financially, which unleashed hell on the world. We have to hold them accountable.
Do you have a number and a plan?
I think that we need to increase our naval capacity by at least 20% over the course of the next several years. I think we have to, at minimum, be able to meet our AUKUS agreement standards. Right now, we are at risk of not even being able to meet our AUKUS standards with Australia and the UK. So what we need to do is have a plan that reverses the trajectory of the divest to invest program
Hugh, I'd like to
by
respond.
20% over the next 3 years.
Governor Christie?
You know, my first observation, Hugh, is that nobody answers your question. And my second observation is these three in the middle think they're the enemy. I know China is the enemy, and that's what we should be focused on. So let's be really clear. The nuclear submarines in this United States Navy is the greatest deterrent to Chinese aggression, and that is the first place I would go to increase American naval power. Our nuclear submarines are able to move stealthily, quietly, and effectively. And if we are going to deter China from invading Taiwan, the only way we're going to do it is to make sure that they don't know whether how many nuclear submarines from the United States of America are in the South China Sea and in that area and ready to strike on them if they decide to move on Taiwan. And so we, as our first priority, need to go.
Okay, so we know all these people are going to be war hawking to various degrees. Moving on. Jesus Didn't Charge says, too damn bad, war is so obscenely profitable. I've been thinking about that. You know what I want? I'm obsessed with 2028. I'm obsessed with the progressive candidate for 2028. Here's what I would like to hear the progressive 2028 presidential candidate pitching. A War Profiteer Act. No company can profit off of a United States war. I don't think we should privatize our military production. I think that should be public. Because if we agree that we need these killing tools, oh good, thank God there's a break. If we agree that we need these killing tools, that falls to me under the same pattern that healthcare or the fire department or anything else that we agree we need falls under. I don't think you should allow there to be a profit motive in war. So I want the progressive candidate saying, no Raytheon, no Lockheed Martin, none of that. No Colt, no, what do they still make, Winchesters? No weaponized throwing wrenches. None that are made by private companies. Only good old-fashioned U.S. government-made military hardware. I'm fine with the U.S. Purchasing what it needs until we are able to get our own infrastructure up and running. But simply putting a law in place that says, hey, companies that sold us stuff during wartime, just so you know, we're going to tax all that money away from you. We're going to take it all back. So there is no point in selling us wartime weaponry. There is no point in lobbying Congress to go to war again. There's no point in any of that. Obviously, that is not a complete policy. Obviously, that's just a notion of a policy. There's no details worked out. I don't have a realistic response for what we would do if we were attacked and needed to respond quickly and needed a bunch of blah, 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 blah. But we have 5 years between now and then. That, to me, seems like enough time to deal with a problem which is a problem. War profiteering needs to stop in the U.S. It's big business when the U.S. gets riled up and goes to war. Jesus didn't charge is completely correct here. And we can end that with legislation.
And welcome back to tonight's NBC News Republican presidential debate. Once again, here's Hugh Hewitt.
Thank you, Lester. We're going to stay on China, and we're going to talk specifically about TikTok. Last week, Congressman Mike Gallagher, who is chairman of the House Bipartisan Select Committee on the Chinese Communist Party, published a long essay on TikTok following the flooding of pro-Hamas propaganda onto TikTok accounts across the United States. Chairman Gallagher called it shocking. He called the app predatory, controlled by America's preeminent adversary, one used to push propaganda and divide America. It's spyware, he said, a means of surveillance. Governor Christie, do you agree with Chairman Gallagher? And if so, would you ban or force the sale of TikTok?
I agree 100% with Chairman Gallagher, and let me say this. TikTok is not only spyware, it is polluting the minds of American young people all throughout this country, and they're doing it intentionally. And when you saw what happened in the last few weeks with all of this anti-Semitic, horrible stuff that their algorithms were pushing out at a gargantuan rate, this is China trying to further divide the United States of America. And this is one of the big failings among many of the Trump administration. He talked tough about TikTok. I heard him do it many times. But when it came down to it, he did not ban them when he could have and should have. And now since then, we've had an additional nearly 6 years of this type of poison being put out throughout the United States, even putting aside the spying, which we know is going on, and the theft of American personal data and information. So in my first week as president, we would ban TikTok. They want to go ahead and sell it, let them go ahead and sell it. But I'll tell you another reason we would do it. Facebook's not in China. X is not in China. They're not permitting a free flow of information to the Chinese people from our social media companies, yet we just open the door and let them do what they're doing. TikTok should be banned because they are poisoning American minds, and I would do it week one.
Thank you, Governor. I want to go to Governor DeSantis. Would you ban or force the sale of TikTok, regardless of whether or not China allowed American apps to operate in China?
Yes, I think that China is the top threat we face. They've been very effective at infiltrating different parts of our society. So my policy on China and the Chinese Communist Party is very simple. We win, they lose. And in order to do that, it's not just military, it's economic, and it's cultural. And as the dad of a 6'5" and a 3-year-old, I'm concerned about the data that they're getting from our young people and what they're doing to pollute the minds of our young people. These kids get these devices.
And when I learn those kids' names, I'm going to ask them, I assume Ron Jr., hey, are you on the Tic Tac? I don't know. I just wanted to imply that he doesn't know his children's names. I assume he's got a note card with him somewhere.
But also their role in our culture. If we ignore that, we're not going to be able to win the fight.
Thank you, Governor. Ambassador Haley, speak to the parents out there. There are probably TikTok apps on half the phones in this auditorium.
No, I'm going to speak to the fact that 2 people hit me and you didn't let me respond. So let's first talk about the fact that they want to talk about the Chinese land from 10 years ago. Yes, I brought a fiberglass company 10 years ago to South Carolina. But Ron, you are the chair of your economic development agency that as of last week said Florida is the ideal place for Chinese businesses. Not only that, you have a company that is manufacturer of Chinese military planes. You have it. They are expanding 2 training sites at 2 of your airports now, one which is 12 miles away from a naval base. Then you have another company that's expanding, and they were just invaded by the Department of Homeland Security. So mine was 10 years ago.
You gave
Yours
them
was
stuff.
6
I
months
didn't
ago.
give them anything.
What's your story?
And I abolished that agency that she's talking about.
No,
Enterprise Florida, we abolished it, and of course we banned China from
scrubbed
buying
the
land.
website
Not
last
exactly
week.
a
Go
great
check.
recruiting pitch if you're banning them from purchasing land
scrubbed
at
the
all.
website
So we've stood
last
up
week.
and we've
Thank you,
done the
Ambassador
right thing
Haley.
in Florida.
Mr. Ramaswamy, we've talked about this. You campaign on TikTok.
love it.
How do you get TikTok banned if you use it?
Well, I want to laugh at why Nikki Haley didn't answer your question, which was about looking at families in the eye. In the last debate, she made fun of me for actually joining TikTok while her own daughter was actually using the app for a long time. So you might want to take care of your family first.
Leave my daughter out of your voice.
Well, you almost had it. Out of your mouth is what you're supposed to say. Keep my daughter. Well,
you have her supporters.
there's really no good way to say
That's
that.
fine. Here's the truth.
You're
The
just
easy
scum.
answer is actually to say that we're just going to ban one app. We have to go further. We have to ban any U.S.
She should be proud of herself.
Actually transferring U.S. data to the Chinese.
just
Here's
scum.
a story
Yeah.
most people don't know. Airbnb hands over U.S. user data to the CCP. Now, that's a U.S.-owned company. So this is the problem when you have Republicans that temporarily go the way the winds blow, and now it's popular to talk tough on China. When she was UN ambassador, called them literally, her words, not mine, our great friend. You can't be fair weather fans of the right policy.
She was ambassador,
root cause.
folks.
Even U.S. companies in Silicon Valley are regularly doing it. Cut the virtue signaling. The fact of the matter is Democrats are on
Here's a
TikTok
difficult
today. The only
question
person,
for you.
one of the few
Who
people
do you
who's
like
putting up content
most
the way the actual algorithms work
of all these
speaking for
people? Or
pro-Israel
rather, who
user
do you
others.
hate least?
And I predict more Republicans will join it, but stop U.S. companies from turning
Who's
over
the
data
least
to Chinese
evil
companies.
creature up there?
Moderators like Kristen don't get to respond to personal attacks, but you do.
Thank you very much. You know, when he talks about me praising China, he doesn't know the fact that the reason China was praised was because I negotiated with China and Russia the largest set of sanctions against North Korea in a generation. That is literally the reason North Korea stopped testing ballistic missiles. So I said China did good on their part. That was a negotiation you could never do.
Is what you said, Nikki. Those are your words, not mine. And so just own up to it.
You would never
you can
have been
change
able
your
to
mind.
get
That's
that
allowed.
negotiation.
He gave her a
Don't
chance.
lie to the people about
I
what
have
you've
fought
said and what you've done
against
in South
China
Carolina.
my
You have
entire
brought them to South
career at
Carolina.
the
Ron is
United
right about
Nations.
that.
Every day I fought China, and I did it
Moderators
by
need to
making
cut his
sure
mic.
no one
She
could
brought them to
get
this
any
country.
agency heads in UN. I did it by making sure that we called them out on human rights. I did it by making sure that we held them accountable on everything that they did. That's the reason we got out of the Human Rights Council. That's the reason we called them out. And there's not been a day I haven't
Nikki,
stopped
Senator
reading
Scott, it is your turn.
Policy
Mr.
experience with the millions
Ramaswamy.
you made afterwards.
Everybody else is hanging on to the rules here, Mr. Ramaswamy. Senator Scott.
Thank you.
Oh, a
We should.
tut-tutting.
I appreciate y'all clapping for me already. This is wonderful.
Orange juice and ginger ale. A
What we should
Michigander's
do is ban TikTok, period.
Panacea.
Now, we saw under
Panacea.
former President
Cure-all.
Trump, he tried to ban TikTok twice, but was struck down by our federal courts. If you cannot ban TikTok, you should eliminate the Chinese presence on the app. Period. We also should provide, in my parents' Bill of Rights, we give parents the opportunity to give their kids permission under 14 to be on those apps. I think it's incredibly important for us as Americans to take back control of the information, especially of our kids. Where does it go? We should know that. One of the ways that we get to know that is by having a parental consent. But if we can eliminate TikTok, that is a first step. But it's not just TikTok. China continues to spy on our kids, but they're also buying our farmlands. We talked about that several times there. We have to make sure that we use the tools that are in our toolkit to stop China from buying farmland near our bases.
Domenico, I do not care for any of them.
Is make sure that they stop stealing
understand.
our intellectual property. They're literally
Wireless
stealing
mic.
our
Well, let me turn this down.
IP to compete.
That actually is true. China rips us off constantly. Barf to all, says Rex Trek. Wireless Mike says Christie, which makes me sick to even type. Same. And same. Rex Trek voting blue. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Whoa, hey, we got a super chat. Let me have a look at that. Unfriendly Atheist. Thank you so much with the very kind $2. Folks, if you want to support solid B+ content like WYCD, the super chats are highly appreciated.
Temporarily ease sanctions to encourage electoral reforms. Governor DeSantis, do you see the political situation in Venezuela as a threat to the United States, and what would your approach be?
We should never rely on Venezuela for oil like Biden has had to go beg. I'm going to unleash all of America's energy potential. On day one, I'm taking all the Biden regulations, the Green New Deal, ripping it up and throwing it in the trash can where it belongs. We're going to lower your gas prices. We're going to create jobs. We're going to lower energy costs, but we're also going to be more energy independent and secure. We'll choose Midland over Moscow. We'll choose the Marcellus over the mullahs, and we'll choose Bakken over Beijing.
Quiz time. Why do we ever use foreign oil when we have oil in our country? Does anybody know? Does anybody know? National security. Our military runs on oil. If we go to war with anybody that sells us oil, we would rather that they have used their finite resource to power our SUVs so that we have all of our resource left to power our tanks. That is the answer.
Going from Venezuela to Colombia. They were fleeing socialism and begging for freedom. We need to make sure that we do everything we can to sanction Maduro. We shouldn't be getting dirty oil, and Biden just gave 500,000 Venezuelans temporary priority status, which is just going to have more of them come. But on the energy side, it cracks me up that Ron...
Ew. More of them? More Venezuelans? Ugh. Gross. Sorry, I'm just being the Republican voter she's trying to appeal to.
Trying to make up for it and act like you weren't a liberal when it comes to the environment. You were. You always have been. Just own it if that's the case. But don't keep saying you're something that you're not.
Let me respond to that. Our whole
I tried my
energy
best
plan,
to destroy
you
the
can't
environment.
Get the shale without fracking. We are absolutely going to frack.
I went out and I burned a tree just to watch it burn, and I hope to start a forest fire.
Everglades, and I know most Floridians agree with me.
You banned fracking.
Thank you very much, Lester.
Thank you.
You
Let's
banned
turn to
fracking.
One of the biggest issues for voters, that of course,
And
is
maybe
the
added
economy. This is
another
a question
year
that will
onto
go
this
to all of you.
globe's
An Iowa
this
voter
planet's
recently
life.
told NBC News, "How am I going to make sure my pantry's stocked without breaking the bank?" You've all said the best way to deal with rising prices is to cut government spending. But that would take time to play out, and Americans are struggling right now.
It also wouldn't work.
I'll start with you. What would you
Rising
do the
prices
moment you
is a
take
result
office to help
of
Americans
lack
manage
of
the cost of
regulation,
living?
which
So we're
all of
talking
these
about
people
short-term here.
are for.
My mother was a single mother who raised me and my brother in a very challenging economic situation. The first thing I can tell you
is that if I am president, I will make sure that that family could not have successfully raised me. That single mother could not have successfully raised me. If I'm president, I will make sure no one like me will ever get another chance to be president.
is that when your gas prices are 40% higher right now than they were just a little over 2 years ago, that's not a problem for my mama. That was a crisis. The first thing I would do as President of the United States is I would sign the XL Keystone Pipeline and start seeing resources flow. Second thing I would do is make sure that there's certainty and predictability so that
he was
those
white,
folks
he would have had
the
applause
leases in
just
our
then.
country would have the certainty and predictability to go ahead and become energy independent. We should focus not just on being energy independent, we should focus on being energy dominant. America is the home to more energy resources than any other country on the planet. We can reduce the price of energy, we can reduce the price of food and the price of electricity if we focus on my build here, don't borrow from China plan that is embedded the Made in America strategy, creates 10 million new jobs in 3 different areas. One is innovation. Second is the high-tech manufacturing. And the third is the energy economy. We have an opportunity as Americans to actually export the surplus energy that we create in our nation and disconnect from China.
Let's just let him.
And tyrants around the world.
Your time is up, but let me just follow up. The idea of pumping gas, of turning on pipelines, that doesn't make gas cheaper that day. I'm talking about you become president. What can you do specifically to help people feel better about their situation or be better with their situation?
Well, actually, it does, to be honest with you. The way that the economy works is it works on the ability to anticipate excess supply versus the demand. When that happens, confidence drives our prices down because we know there's going to be a greater surplus. When you allow for those who have leases to actually start drilling, to start using those leases for more energy excavation, you put our economy in the strongest position. And as a result of that, prices start going down.
Public Utility quite correctly pointing out that U.S. is a net exporter of fossil fuels. It's these people, number one, they don't truly, they with the exception of maybe Nikki Haley and Chris Christie, they don't have an understanding of what they are talking about in this regard. They have less understanding than we do here, and we are not currently, I assume, presidential hopefuls. But also, their lies don't even make sense.
Would put people on a better economic footing right away.
So I started off working minimum wage jobs. I did $6 an hour as an electrician's assistant. I worked all kinds of things to be able to get through school. And I did that because I believed in America. If you work hard and get the most out of your God-given ability, you can get ahead. And what's happening now, many of you are working hard and you're falling further and further behind. I've met people in Iowa, New Hampshire, and all across the country who've talked about all the burdens that they're facing with the rising prices. And I've heard from multiple people the same story. When they go grocery shopping, what they now do is they figure out what they have to take out of the cart once it's ringing up, because it rings up so much faster and so much higher at the cash register that they can't afford the full cart of groceries anymore. We have to restore the American dream in this country. What can you do on day one? Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take all the executive orders, the regulations, everything involving Bidenomics. I'm going to rip it up, and I'm going to throw it in the trash can on day one where it belongs. That is going to give the economy breathing room, and I'm also going to rein in the Federal Reserve. They have helped create, with their reckless monetary policy, what we have faced since the COVID-19 pandemic. They botched it. Congress botched it. I agree with both parties are to blame.
Second part, the Fed
should
part,
focus on stable prices. They are not an economic central planner for the American people.
Governor,
I'm actually okay with that, and I have no idea how it found its way into his politics.
Right, and as a CEO, the
I'm sure he's
going
to get kicked in the ribs by his donors tonight.
Policy prescription for this country. Increase the supply of everything. It's the law of supplies and demand. Increase the supply of energy. That brings down the cost of energy, grows the economy. Drill, frack, burn coal, embrace nuclear. Increase the supply of labor in this country. Stop using our taxpayer money to pay people more to stay at home instead of to go to work. Increase the supply of housing. People don't talk about this one in the Republican Party. The land use restrictions are constricting the supply of housing. That's making housing more expensive for ordinary Americans across this country. So that's the true answer. And I think it takes a CEO in the White House who actually understands this to get this done. Because Americans at home, they know the Bidenomics is a lie. Prices are going up. Interest rates and mortgages to buy your home are going up. But wages have remained flat. That's the hard diagnosis for our economy. And this is about more than just our economy. I say this as a member of my generation. I'm 38 years old. I'm the youngest person ever to run for U.S. president as a Republican. The reason my generation has lost our sense of national pride, in part, is because people in my generation feel like the American dream isn't available to them. And part of the reason why is we burdened them with four-year college degrees that did not serve their head start on the American dream. People will be more proud of a country if we're all making more money in that country. This is how we revive national pride and our identity, and it will take a CEO.
I'm going to just stop him from saying a line that will make me actually vomit on air. A CEO is not what we need to run the country. We don't need someone to do no work and pillage our wealth.
Because it drives every one of those other prices. You know, now food gets to your grocery store, it gets trucked. And those truckers have to pay for fuel and for the higher fuel prices. And when you go ahead and you tell people, we are going to unleash every bit of American energy.
Okay, so just so you guys know, because they've repeated this so much that you might think that it is related to oil. It's not. The main reason food prices are so high is that the makers of the food realized that we were all clucking like terrified chickens about inflation. And because they knew that's what we were worried about, and that's what we were expecting, they knew they could get away with raising their prices. How do I know that? Well, because we have evidence of it, because they've admitted to it, because we have it conclusively confirmed that is exactly what happened.
But with letting them know we will supply them with everything they need, that will also bring stability to the market. Energy is the key to bringing this down. It's what every American family needs when they turn on their lights, fill up their car, and go to the grocery store. And we need to do that first and foremost. That's the short-term answer.
Governor Christie, thank you. Ambassador Hillary, let me come at this from a slightly different direction. Americans in rural communities are being especially squeezed by inflation right now. An Iowa State University study found that last year inflation cost rural households about an extra $5,000. How would you specifically help rural Americans who are suffering right now, Ambassador?
Well, I'm a product of rural America. I grew up in rural South Carolina, and I can tell you what we're seeing now in America is the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer. We have to go and start beefing up the middle class. And the first thing I would do is I will eliminate the federal gas and diesel tax in this country. We'll cut taxes on the middle class, but we have to stop this spending binge that's happening by Republicans and Democrats in Congress. I will make sure, one, we claw back the $500 billion of unspent COVID dollars that are out there.
I just want to say for the record, I'm fine with repealing the gas tax, believe it or not. I am fine, as long as it's replaced with an equal tax or greater tax on billionaires.
Veto any spending bill that doesn't go back to pre-COVID levels. That will cut trillions and allow us to be safe. We also need to be not energy independent, energy dominant. We are blessed with resources. Let's do it. But the reason no one should give you a number, Hugh, on the amount of ships in the Navy is because in a few years, our interest expense is going to be more than our defense budget. So no one can give you that number realistically without first tackling what's happening with the financial situation. It would be a false number to give you that. We have got to understand this is a crisis. It is a national security concern. If we don't deal with what's going to happen with that interest expense in a few years, we're going to look like Japan, and we can't let that happen. The strong dollar matters.
Ambassador, thank you very much. Kristen.
Americans could see their Social Security benefits drastically cut in the next decade because the program is running out of money. Former President Trump has said, quote, under no circumstances should Republicans cut entitlements. Governor Christie, first to you. You have proposed raising the retirement age for younger Americans. What would that age be specifically, and would you consider making any other reforms to Social Security?
Sure, and we have to deal with this problem. Now, look, if we raise the retirement age a few years for folks that are in their 30s and 40s, I have a son who's in the audience tonight who's 30 years old. If he can't adjust to a few-year increase in Social Security retirement age over the next 40 years, I got bigger problems with him than his Social Security payments. And the fact is, we need to be realistic about this. There are only three things that go into determining whether Social Security can be solvent or not: retirement age, eligibility for the program in general, and taxes. That's it. We are already overtaxed in this country, and we should not raise those taxes. But on eligibility also, I don't know if out there tonight, and if you're watching Warren, I don't know if Warren Buffett is collecting Social Security, but if he is, shame on you. You shouldn't be taking the money.
Interesting.
There are programs in this country that we all pay for, that we don't get a direct benefit from. Food stamps is one of them. I've never, fortunately in my life, ever had me or my family on food stamps. But I'm glad it's there so that no one in this country goes to bed hungry at night if they have availability to that program. But I don't get a direct benefit. The fact is, on Social Security, remember why it was established. It was established as a safety net program to make sure that no one would grow old in this country in poverty. That's what we got to get back to. Rich people should not be collecting Social Security.
Governor, can you give me a specific age, 69, 70? What would the age be?
No, look, that's going to be a part of a negotiation with
irrelevant.
Congress.
You know, I'm glad he actually attempted to approach that from a somewhat populist perspective, but he also made the mistake of saying something a little bit real about it. One of the answers is tax more. Here's an easy solution: raise the cap.
Tells you that they're not going to take on entitlements is not being serious. Social Security will go bankrupt in 10 years. Medicare.
No, it will not.
Right now, you have Ron and Trump joining
Raise the cap.
Biden and Pelosi saying they're not going to change or do any sort of.
And since all of their answers are going to be nonsense, I'll just give you some actual facts that you can take to your psychopaths that you know who are considering voting for Republicans. You raise the cap. That simply means that after $160,000 of income in this country right now, 0% of it, not a single percent of it, goes to Social Security after $160,000. Raise that. In fact, take it off entirely. Take it off entirely. Your Social Security should always be paid for by the rich, because the rich benefit the most from people that spend their whole lives making these monsters rich, only to end up having just the pittance that is Social Security at the end of it all. Raise the cap. Get rid of the cap. Just memorize that phrase. Raise the cap, raise the cap, raise the cap. How about this? Ban the cap. Even better. No cap, no cap, no cap on Social Security.
But her math assumes $7 trillion of our $33 trillion national debt going to fight wars like in places like Iraq and Afghanistan. Minus that, our national debt would be $26 trillion right now. Then you go to zero-based budgeting, which I've proposed as a CEO. It's how I've run businesses. It's how many CEOs run businesses. Don't use last year's budget as the baseline. Start with zero as the baseline and then ask what's actually necessary. 75% headcount reduction. Yes, that is severe. In the number of federal employees in the Washington, D.C. bureaucracy. Shut down redundant agencies that should not exist. Deliver economic growth as a positive tailwind. I think we can get to 3, 4, maybe even 5% GDP growth if we really take the regulatory shackles off of our economy. And against that backdrop, I believe this is our last best window to be able to take care of our national debt problem through those severe measures, including sacrificing the foreign wars that many bloodthirsty members of both parties have a hunger for.
Going for a populist candidacy, I'll give him that. And I don't hate it.
So we can't have the first conversation we were having, sending foreign aid willy-nilly
within the
countries
context of
whose
his answer.
National debt per capita is less than ours.
Thank you,
but if we
Mr.
do this
Ramaswamy.
correctly, I think this is our last window, and it'll take a CEO from the next generation to do it.
Thank you very much. Senator,
No
stop
CEO.
way in here.
Never
What
again.
are you looking at to keep Social
Never
Security
again.
sustainable?
The bottom line is a simple one. We have to grow our economy and cut our spending.
Ban
Let me
the
just
cap.
say to my mama and to every other mama or grandfather receiving Social Security, as President of the United States, I will protect your Social Security. The fact is that we're spending today
he might have
about
actually just
$1.1 trillion of
earned
Social
some points
Security,
in the polls.
about $750 billion on Medicare,
Depending
about
on what
$300 billion
DeSantis says.
on Medicaid, about $400 billion on veterans benefits, $1.7 trillion on annual appropriations. If we're going to actually tame this tiger, the way you do it is not by picking on seniors who have paid into a program that deserve their money coming back out to them. The way you deal with it is, number one, you have to grow your economy. My plan, Made in America, creates 10 million new jobs, grows our economy at 5%. By doing so, you add trillions of dollars of economic activity and billions of dollars to your treasury. Number two, you have to cut taxes. When we cut taxes in 2017, I wrote the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. Everybody said, well, guess what? Revenue will go down. Well, in 2018, after we wrote it in 2017, what happened? Revenue went up by 3%, and the next year, it went up by another 3%. So what we know is that the Laffer curve still works, but the lower the tax, the higher the revenue. And finally, if we're going to deal with it, we have to take our annual appropriations back to pre-2020, pre-COVID levels of spending, which
All right, so kudos to him for giving half a humane answer followed by devolving into jibber-jabber.
Would you be open to raising the retirement age, or do you rule that out?
all you have to do is go to a farm in Iowa and watch the hard work and the dedication.
Yes or
You and
no,
I have
Senator?
a conversation.
Yes or
the
no,
answer
though?
is no, but listen to this, though,
Thank
before you go on. Thank you. The fact of the matter is that the more physical your labor, a year or 2 or 3 more is actually challenging to the physical body. You and I might have a different perspective, but for those farmers, they're working
That's
night
true.
and day.
Thank you, Senator. I appreciate it. Governor DeSantis,
That was a
finally, to you,
real
would you
answer,
be open
by the
to
way.
raising the retirement age, and how would you keep Social Security sustainable?
Well, look, as governor of Florida, I know a few people on Social Security, and
This is going to make
I know
him
it's
nervous
important.
because
My
he's going
grandmother
to try
lived
to
till
take it away.
91, and Social Security
And so because
was
he's
their sole
nervous,
source
that
of
head's
income,
going
and
to
that's
flop
true
so
for
much.
a lot of seniors throughout this country. So what I'd say to seniors in America, promise made, promise kept. I understand what you're going through with the rising prices, and you need that Social Security check. So we'll make sure to get that done. What can you do to help shore up Social Security? One of the things that's causing problems is the inflation. We have to reduce inflation. When you have higher inflation, the seniors get a...
It sounds like he's saying he won't touch it. However, let's get disappointed.
You need to get to at least 3% growth. You're never going to be able to have issues, be able to solve the budget without that. But I would note this. Congress for decades took money from Social Security. Social Security would have more tax revenue than it put out. They would take it and then they'd write an IOU to Social Security. Congress has a lot of dirty hands on this. I'm going to force Congress to stop spending so much money. And you know, one thing we have to do when we talk about the retirement age is just something that's changed in the last 4 or 5 years. Life expectancy in the United States is declining.
So, Governor,
in this
yes
country.
or no? Would you raise it? Would you raise the retirement age?
When life expectancy is declining, I don't see how you could raise it the other direction. So it's one thing to peg it on life expectancy, but we have had a significant decline in life expectancy in this country,
So
and that's just a fact.
All right, Governor DeSantis, thank you. Thank you, candidates.
No.
We'll be right back.
No.
After a quick...
He did not rule it out. I will say this is the first smart thing I've ever seen DeSantis do. The first smart thing. He's going to wait. I mean, he won't be the president, but his plan he just laid out. He is going to wait for the first year life expectancy goes up, even just a smidge. Even if he just has to measure one town. And when life expectancy goes up, he will take that number. If it goes up by 5 years, if it goes up by 1 year, whatever. If it goes up even slightly, he will take it and he will apply it to Social Security and add it right on. Brutal. I will say, I'm impressed with, strangely enough, Tim Scott's answer. Tim Scott, because he staked out a position, he said, I'm going to be different than the other candidates in this way, Social Security. He could actually tear into it and talk about real things, and he didn't have to tap dance around the answer like the rest of these folks. And he said some real stuff. Yeah, when you get older, injuries are a more serious concern. Have you ever seen an old construction worker? I've hired them. Back in the day when I had a contracting company, basically every employee was an ex-con. I wasn't trying to be like a noble hero or whatever. It's construction work, and a very common trade you pick up in the clink is working with wood, working with what have you. A lot of folks got their education that way. But also a lot of them had done time. A lot of them were coming out after 20 years. And they were older. I had to, not because anybody asked me, but just because I was watching the crew and I had to be aware of what everybody was able to do. I had to schedule more breaks for the older folks. And it's not, doesn't mean old folks can't do physical labor. They surely can. But your life shouldn't depend on it. Your life should not depend on it. That is the reality they want to make. On that stage, everybody but Tim Scott, they want to take somebody who's 65 and scared. Who is 65 and has nothing. They want to take somebody who's 65 and whose hands shake from an ailment they picked up at some point during those 65 years and say, too bad. Wake up tomorrow and go build something for someone. Go build something you won't enjoy. Wake up tomorrow and go labor. Wake up tomorrow and sweat. Wake up tomorrow and force your body, which is hurting you. Force your body, which is aching, to do more work. So somebody with not a single gray hair who has earned nothing in their life, somebody like that, can make an extra $100,000 this year because they have a couple of dozen employees just like you who are killing themselves. Understand something else about age. It's not just that you recover from injury less easily as you age. It's that you've had more years to pick up a permanent injury. The same thing could have happened to a 20-year-old as a 40-year-old, the same car accident, but you have more chances to be in that car accident on the road to 65. Just understand that.
It can mean a lot of different things. It can mean 2 million people who crossed illegally last year. It can mean more than 150 arrests of people on the terror watch list. It can mean the burden on states from having migrants move into their states from the southwestern border. But I want to talk about opioids specifically and fentanyl. And I'll start with you, Senator Scott. Tens of thousands of Americans' families have suffered a death to fentanyl. Young people sometimes die taking one pill. What can you do as Commander-in-Chief on the first day to stop fentanyl and the waterfall of it into this country?
Well, number one, we should close our southern border. For $10 billion, we could close our southern border. For an additional $5 billion, we could use the currently available military technology to surveil our southern border to stop fentanyl from crossing our border.
But you know how fentanyl gets here. People coming in legally.
Sanction the Mexican cartels. If you
not
remember
related
the path,
to this.
The precursors come from China. Then they are manufactured in Mexican labs, and then the Mexican cartels bring them across our border. By sanctioning their accounts and eliminating their cash, we starve them of what they need. Number one, closing our southern border makes it nearly impossible to get in. The military-grade technology is a backup, making
US
sure
citizens
that we
bring
not
it in.
only stop 70,000
Tim, you broke my heart.
deaths in the last 12 months because of fentanyl, it also allows us to deal with the human trafficking travesty that is entering in our country in the same path. If we are going to deal effectively with 100,000 overdose deaths in our country and the 70,000 that is directly linked to fentanyl, we have to deal with our ports of entry and deal with our southern border. If we do that effectively, we have started reducing the challenge from the outside, and then we have to deal with the challenge on the inside, which seems to be connected to a mental health crisis that is spreading throughout our nation.
Governor Christie, Senator Scott just mentioned ports of entry. 90% of the fentanyl that is seized in the United States is seized at ports of entry. We don't know what's coming in across the open southern border. You've been a United States attorney. You've taken on cartels.
Thank you
Can it really be done
for tossing
quickly?
that in
What would
there.
you do as president?
It can be done quickly in two ways, Hugh, on fentanyl. The first way is exactly as you suggest, at ports of entry. We have to beef up what our law enforcement has in terms of technology. I would invest in that as president. We need to make sure that law enforcement has every tool at its disposal to do it. Secondly, on day one, I would sign an executive order that would send the National Guard to partner with Customs and Border Patrol, both at ports of entry and at the open ports of our border. Customs and Border Patrol agents are overwhelmed. There's 200,000 encounters a month over the last 11 months. We simply do not have the man and woman power at the border to be able to deal with it. And so dealing with both law enforcement, and you're right, we have done this, we can do this, but we got to give them the tools to do it, and technology is one of the biggest tools that we don't have enough of at the ports of entry. Now, we also need to lower demand, Hugh, in this country. And the way to lower demand is to start treating people again. You know, we started to do this before COVID.
At least half of it's a real
and we haven't done enough of it. And for every family out there tonight who has lost a loved one to fentanyl or to any other type of opioid overdose, what you know is all you want is a chance for them to win their lives back.
And to get revenge on the Sackler family.
Call this what it is. It is a disease like heart disease, diabetes, or any other disease like cancer that can be treated, should be treated. We not only have to stop supply, but we have to lower demand and save lives.
Governor. Governor DeSantis, you have talked about using United States Special Forces to attack the cartels where they manufacture the chemicals that come from China. How often, how many, what does that look like?
Well, first, I was speaking to a dad who lost a son to fentanyl overdose. Son wasn't a drug addict. He had taken some pill that happened to be laced with fentanyl, and it was a fatal overdose. And when he told me, obviously the pain of losing a child is as bad as it gets, but he said what was salt in the wounds
was how I was smiling the whole time.
Don't give a damn about what's going on in this country. They don't care that we have tens of thousands of opioid deaths, that the fentanyl's pouring in. They are not taking the type of action that we need to. We're declaring it a national emergency on day one. I'm sending U.S. military to the border. I'm going to stop the invasion cold. I am going to deport people who came illegally. And I'm even going to build the border wall and have Mexico pay for it like Donald Trump promised. How are you going to do it? Yeah, Mexico's not going to fork over money. We're going to impose fees on the remittances that foreign workers send to foreign countries. We'll raise billions of dollars. I'll build a wall. But we are going to designate the cartels to be foreign terrorist organizations or something similar to that. And we're going to authorize the use of deadly force. We're going to have maritime operations to interdict precursor chemicals going into Mexico. But I'll tell you this, if someone in the drug cartels is sneaking fentanyl across the border when I'm president, that's going to be the last thing they do. We're going to shoot them stone cold dead.
I truly hate this man. I hate him.
Ambassador Haley, if the United States uses special forces in Mexico without prior notice to the Mexican allies to our south, what would your colleagues at the United Nations think about that?
I don't care what my colleagues at the United Nations think. What I'll tell you is, first of all, you have to go to the source. We have lost more Americans than the Vietnam, Afghanistan, and Iraq wars combined. We lost 75,000 Americans last year. Go to the source. It is the reason why we'll continue to say we will end all normal trade relations with China until they stop murdering Americans. You watch how quick that flow stops. The second thing is we'll send special operations in to take out the cartels. We need to go to where they're distributing it, where the supply centers are, and take them out. We'll put 25,000 more Border Patrol and ICE agents on the ground and let them do their job. We will defund sanctuary cities. We will go back to the Remain in Mexico policy so that everybody stays in Mexico and they never get here in the first place. And instead of catch and deport, we'll go to catch and release. I'm sorry, instead of catch and release, we'll go to catch and deport.
Okay.
That is the way we'll deal
Almost
with the border.
wasn't racist,
Those are the
but
things
then
that
she's
we
like,
have to do going forward. But I do agree with Chris. One of the first things that we have to do is really focus on mental health and addiction centers. It is something that is needed in our country terribly because we don't deal with mental health, and someone who doesn't get care for mental health falls into addiction, and we owe it to them to treat it like the cancer that it is.
Mr. Ramaswamy, special forces in Mexico, shoot them stone cold dead at the border?
One thing I just want to say in how we're talking about this issue is, like Ron, I've actually met many parents across this country who have lost their kids to laced pharmaceuticals that have fentanyl in them. The only thing I would ask, Ron, I think you'd be on the same page with me on this. Let's not even call that an overdose. Right. That is not an overdose. That is poisoning. If you put that fentanyl in a Big Mac, we would not call that an overdose. You'd call it what it is. It's closer to bioterrorism. And I say that because as it uniquely relates to this crisis, that does warrant more aggressive means to deal with it. So there's a new presidential election in Mexico in 2024. People may not be aware of that. It's going to be someone other than Obrador, who has been a disaster in Mexico. I think he's even mentioned me obliquely in speeches to say that somebody who would do this shouldn't get anywhere near the White House. Well, AMLO, get out of the way. There's going to be someone else in charge. I hope to build a good relationship with that next president of Mexico. We'll use our own military to seal our own southern border. What we need to do is stop using our military to protect somebody else's border halfway around the world when we're short right here at home. Get serious about protecting this border. And then the other thing that hasn't been discussed is the northern border. I'm the only candidate on the stage, as far as I'm aware, who has actually visited the northern border. There was enough fentanyl that was captured just on the northern border last year to kill 3 million Americans. So we got to just skate to where the puck is going, not just where the puck is. Don't just build the wall, build both walls. Can't just complete the wall, use the military to seal the Swiss cheese for the tunnels that they're actually building underneath that wall.
Thank you, Mr. Ramaswamy.
Be practical and actually get this job done.
Thank you. Kristen.
Thank you, Hugh.
None
Let's
of these
talk now
people are
about
serious
last
human
night's
beings.
election results.
Oh,
Abortion rights
yes.
supporters saw victories in Ohio and Virginia following earlier wins in states like Kansas and Kentucky.
Let's
Governor
talk about
DeSantis, first to you, how do you see the path forward for Republicans on this issue?
Retirement.
Well, I stand for a culture of life, and I understand that it's important that everyone gets a shot. I'm reminded of a story about a young mother who was struggling in Jamaica about 45 years ago. She was counseled to not have a baby because she was poor, baby wouldn't have opportunity, and she came close to have an abortion, but she decided to have the baby born poor in Jamaica. And the
that
reason I know
baby
that
was
story
me.
is because that baby girl ended up emigrating to the state of Florida.
That's right,
becoming
you
a
bomba
lawyer and a
class.
judge, and I appointed her to the Florida Supreme Court in August of 2022. We're better off when everybody counts. We're better off when we can promote a culture of life.
Not
At the same
addressing the
time,
question.
I
Y'all got
understand that some of
whipped.
these states are doing it a little bit different. Texas is not going to do it the same as New Hampshire. Iowa's not necessarily going to do it the same as Virginia. So you got to work from the bottom up. You got to do a better job on these referenda. I think of all the stuff that's happened to the pro-life cause, they have been caught flat-footed on these referenda, and they have been losing the referenda. A lot of the people who are voting for the referenda are Republicans who would vote for a Republican candidate. So you got to
just learned
understand
the
how to
word
do that. But let's just
referenda.
be clear. The Democrats have
Here's
taken a
word of the
position
day,
they
toilet
will not identify the point at which there should be any protection all the way up until birth. That is wrong, and we cannot stand for that.
All right, Governor DeSantis, thank you. Ambassador Haley, let me have you weigh in. Former President
And try
Trump
to
has consistently
answer the
blamed
question.
the abortion issue and how Republican candidates have talked about it for their electoral losses. How do you see the path forward?
You know, I've said it before. I think you have to be honest with the American people. This is a personal issue for every woman and every man. I am unapologetically pro-life, not because the Republican Party tells me to be, but because my husband Michael was adopted and I had trouble having both of my children. So I'm surrounded by blessings. Having said that, when you look post-Roe, a wrong was made right. They took it out of the hands of unelected justices and they put it in the hands of the people. And now we're seeing states vote. And what I'll tell you is, as much as I'm pro-life, I don't judge anyone for being pro-choice, and I don't want them to judge me for being pro-life. So when we're looking at this, there's some states that are going more on the pro-life side. I welcome that. There's some states that are going more on the pro-choice side. I wish that wasn't the case, but
The
the
important
people
thing to
decided.
know is that
But when
I,
it comes
Nikki
to the
Haley,
federal
am
law,
for
which is what's being
states'
debated
rights
here,
and the
be
Confederacy.
honest,
Oh,
it's going
not
to take
that.
60 Senate votes, a majority of the House, and a president to sign it.
I'm not even gonna bust her
we haven't
chops
had
on the
60
details.
Senate votes in over 100 years. We might have 45
Pro-choice
pro-life senators.
Republican.
So no Republican president can ban abortions any more than a Democrat president can ban these
Sort
state
of.
laws. So let's find consensus. Let's agree on how we can ban
Curious to
late-term
hear what
abortions.
Christie has
Let's
to
make
say.
sure we encourage adoptions and good quality adoptions. Let's make
And yeah, and she's going to do a lot of pandering. So Christie could turn this thing around if he comes out as being staunchly pro-choice. He might take the election from Biden if he comes out as being pro-choice. Not that he's a good human being. I'm just talking about the state of his current grift. They're all grifters. Let's get this. Wait a
save
minute.
as many, put a woman in jail or give her the death penalty for getting an abortion. Let's focus on how to save as many babies as we can and support as many moms as we can and stop the judgment. We don't need to divide them.
For governors, former governor, Democratic governor of Virginia, who talked about infanticide. We need a 15-week federal limit. 3 out of 4 Americans agree with a 15-week limit. 47 out of 50 countries in Europe agree with a 15-week limit. I would challenge both Nikki and Ron to join me at a 15-week limit. It is in our nation's best interest, and frankly, I think it's unethical and immoral to allow for abortions up until the day of birth. We have an opportunity in this nation to stop that reckless behavior from states like California,
So,
New York, and Illinois.
Rob
I'd
has
go a step
personality.
further.
Who's
In
Rob?
my parents' plan, we
Ron?
start by talking about funding
He does.
block granting
He has personality.
resources to
Not
crisis pregnancy
a
centers.
good one,
We
but
should
he does have
support
one.
adoption. There are a number of ways that we can say to the expectant mother that we stand with you. We should not only be pro-life
We
before
won't
the
say
child
any
is
of
born,
them, but we
should
could.
be pro-life after the child is born just as much.
Senator Scott, thank you. Ambassador Haley, your name was invoked. Would you support a 15-week federal limit?
I would support anything that would pass because that's what would save more babies and support more moms. But you have to be honest with the American people, and I appreciate that Tim keeps calling me out for this. But Tim, there was a bill last year. Lindsey Graham sponsored it. You didn't even co-sponsor the bill. And then when you first were interviewed on this, when you ran, you wouldn't even say you were for 15 weeks. What I'm saying to the American people is, let's see what we can agree on. Let's bring people together and decide what we can agree on. I will sign anything where we can get 60 Senate votes, but don't make the American people think that you're going to push something on them when we don't even have the votes in the Senate. It's important that we're honest about that.
Let me go to Mr. Ramaswamy. Would you support a 15-week federal ban, and what is the path forward on this issue?
I just wanted to say, I mean, I think Nikki Haley did invoke being honest, and I at least want to give credit to Tim Scott. He's honest about where he stood, and I think you should be honest, not making a political calculus, but to say, if a bill is served up, would you sign it? Here's my view on this. Speaking as a man, they say men have trouble speaking on this issue. I don't think we need to be that way. It was my home state of Ohio, I'm upset about this, yesterday, that passed a constitutional amendment that now effectively codifies a right to abortion all the way up to the time of birth without parental consent. Why? It's back to that Republican culture of losing. The Republicans did not have an alternative amendment or vision on the table. I know Ohio. I was born, raised, and I lived there. It's representative of the country. If in the state of Ohio we talked about access to contraception, adoption, and also here's the missing ingredient in this movement.
I'm too hairy
sexual
right now.
responsibility for men. We live in an era of reliable genetic paternity tests that are 100% reliable. So we can say men deserve more responsibility. So we can
Interesting.
tell
Let's
women,
find out where he's
we're
going.
all in this together. It's not men's rights versus women's rights. It's about human rights. And I come back to that case that Clarence Thomas spoke of. A pregnant woman walking down the street. She's assaulted. The unborn child dies in that assault. You find me one person in this country who says that that criminal does not deserve liability for that death. You won't find one. That says we share the same instincts on this issue, but we require, I believe, a different generation of leadership
thank you.
to actually lead us forward and unite the country on this
Thank you.
honesty.
Thank you, Mr. Ramaswamy.
I somehow don't think Republican
federal
men
limits
are going to be
important to a lot
down
of
for
Republicans. Where do you stand on this issue, and what is the path
taking
forward
responsibility for anything.
For 50 years, conservative lawyers have been arguing that the federal government should have absolutely nothing to do with this issue constitutionally because it's nowhere in the Constitution. And then Dobbs comes and we finally gain that victory, which was the creation of a constitutional right out of thin air that didn't exist. And now we have people running to say, let's short circuit the states from doing what they need to do, and let's go right to some type of federal ban at a certain number of weeks. And people on the stage have been all over the place, 20 weeks, 15 weeks, 12, 6. Look, the Frowners were really smart. And this is an issue that should be decided in each state. And I trust the people of this country, state by state, to make the call for themselves. Now, it's going to lead to a lot of divergence. In Oklahoma, you can't get an abortion unless the life of the mother is at risk. In my home state of New Jersey, it goes up to 9 months that you get an abortion. I find that morally reprehensible. But that is what the people of our state have voted for. And we should not short circuit that process until every state's people have the right to weigh in on it. But here's the bigger issue, Kirsten. The bigger issue is, and Tim began to touch on this, we're not pro-life for the whole life. To be pro-life for the whole life means that the life of a 16-year-old drug addict on the floor of the county lockup is precious, and we should get treatment for her to restore her life. The 52-year-old who's drug addicted should make sure that any of his children who he's passed that addiction on to are treated well too. Pro-life's not just in the womb,
Glad
Kirsten. It's
to
for the
hear
whole
them
life.
gravitating
Governor,
towards
Candidates, thank
hinting
you. We're
at
going to take a
humanity.
final break. break, and when we come back, we'll hear from all of you with your closing statements. This is the NBC News Republican presidential debate.
I got 12 entire minutes before Left Past 10 starts. I have Discord open. I'm keeping a hairy eyeball on that. I will be ready to rock. I want to see this thing through. If possible, I want to see the end of this thing. Ooh. I do have to say, it's immensely pleasing to me that these folks feel uncomfortable dwelling on the resounding losses they received. All of them tried to take that question and turn it into a discussion about the future, rather than their party's present mistakes. Because they were uncomfortable talking about their party's present mistakes. I will say this. What I look for in politicians is very different than my personal political beliefs, believe it or not. Yeah, it's very convenient if a politician believes everything I believe. That neat, neat. That's a sign I won't have to do much prodding. But what I look for more than that in a politician is somebody who will talk straight, answer exactly the question asked, and listen to the input of others. It's difficult to show yourself listening to the input of others, at least in one moment, but you do that over time, over a series of... We have long enough elections, campaigns, I should say. There's enough time to see them changing in a way that is not merely to please, but to be more correct. I enjoy that. Bernie Sanders is a great example of that. He happens to align quite closely with my political beliefs. But truly, I would take a centrist Dem. I would. If they were able to listen to facts, be reasonable, correct their perspective, or correct themselves if they're wrong, so on and so forth. And more importantly, answer things directly. Case in point, Gretchen Whitmer, governor of my state. I hope she runs in 28. I slightly hope that Joe Biden says he isn't going to run now. But Whitmer runs. But I hope Whitmer runs in 28. I want to point out, I did not vote for her in the primary. I voted for Abdul El-Sayed, who was running against... Oh, Christ. Who was running against her. He was more of a liberal. More of a progressive. But I'm very satisfied with Whitmer because of the way she conducts herself. And frankly, if you conduct yourself in such a way that a bunch of right-wing terrorists try to kill you, you're a hero to me. So I look for that in a politician. And even though there are plenty of conservative politicians that do fill that checklist, do they answer things directly, will they listen to input, none of them are Republicans. Not a one of them is a Republican. Because Republicans are just criminals. They are the worst human beings. Republican politicians are the worst human beings currently on Earth, in my opinion.
Well, welcome back, everyone. With only 2 hours for a debate, we know there are other major issues that are important to Republican primary voters. I'll ask you each to please use your closing statement to focus on any topic you didn't have time to address and why you and not former President Trump would be the party's best choice to tackle these important issues. You each have a minute. Senator Scott, we'll start with you. 1 minute.
There's a crisis that is growing in our nation, and that crisis is cultural and spiritual. We need a renewal, a great awakening. We should reject the left's valueless, faithless, fatherless society. We should turn back to faith, patriotism, and individual responsibility. We should stop choosing victimhood and start choosing victory. We should stop kneeling in protest and start kneeling in prayer. There are basic truths that built this country.
Really wanted to make sure that it was clear that he was going to sell out folks that look like him.
If you commit a violent crime, you go to jail. And if God made you a man, you play sports against men. I do not just want to...
Audience, please.
Ooh, they really do like that piece of bigotry.
I just want to win the battle against Joe Biden. I want us together to win the war for our Christian conservative values that changed my life.
Senator Scott, thank you. Governor Christie, you have
That's why I'm asking you for your vote.
Thank you for hosting tonight. Listen, it's a gift to be an American. And I'm running for president of the United States because I'm tired. I'm tired of seeing the division. I'm tired of seeing the anger. And I can see in the eyes of Americans their exhaustion. Their exhaustion from the petty, personal politics that have taken over this country
advantage of that.
Over the last number of years. I'm running for president to
like
be a president
nice
of
guy.
Consequence, to do the big things, to make sure that America's role in the world stays number one, that we stand up for our friends and allies around the world, and we stand up for what we believe in right here at home. And it's not to eliminate our differences. Our differences has always been our strength as a country, not our weakness. But you can't truly say you love America unless you're ready to open up your heart to every American. I'm going to open up my heart to every American as president, and I will make sure that I return honesty, integrity to the Oval Office. We deserve and should accept
nothing specific.
Less.
Great.
Governor, thank you very much. Let's go to Mr. Ramaswamy now. Your 1 minute.
Get ready for a bunch of nonsense.
We talked a lot about foreign wars tonight, but we're in the middle of a war right here at home. It's a war not between black and white or Democrat and Republican. It's between those of us who believe in our founding ideals and love this country and a fringe minority who hates the United States of America. And I think it's going to take a commander-in-chief to lead us to victory in that war, who first of all knows that we're in a war. Second of all, can't be captured by the special interests along the way. But third is from the next generation, somebody with fresh legs to lead us to victory. I'll shut down the deep state. I'll declare economic independence from China. I'll keep us out of World War III, and then revive national pride in this country. I also want to close with one message to the Democrat Party. End this farce that Joe Biden is going to be your nominee. We know he's not even the president of the United States. He's a puppet for the managerial class. So have the guts to step up and be honest about who you're actually going to put up so we can have an honest debate. Biden should step aside.
That was a
end
play
his
to the
candidacy
QAnon
now
crowd.
So we can see whether it's Newsom or Michelle Obama or whoever else.
All right,
just
Mr.
tell us the
Ramaswamy,
truth so we can have an honest debate.
That was a huge play for the QAnon crowd. We know he's not even the president of the United States. Wink.
Ambassador Haley, you have 1 minute for your closing.
Thank you. The world is on fire. We have a war in Europe. We've got a war in the Middle East. We've got China on the march.
And
it is very important that we know how to defend our freedoms and how to defeat terrorism and socialism.
Whoever mentioned cat people last week.
We have to know the difference between good and evil. We have to know the difference between right and wrong. We need to know that a strong America doesn't start wars. A strong America prevents wars. And the way we can focus on that is to make sure we go back to the soul of America and be strong and proud again. And we can't do that. We can't win the fights of the 21st century with politicians from the 20th century. We have to move forward. And we can do this. I know we can do this. So join our movement. Go to NikkiHaley.com, and we will once again show what America that's strong and proud looks like. God bless.
Ambassador, thank you. Governor DeSantis, your closing. You have 1 minute.
We must reverse our country's decline, and that is going to require leadership. I will take the hits, I will take the arrows, I will take the barbs, because it's not about me, it's about you. It's not about the past, it's about your future. We are going to fight for you. I am going to win for you and your family, and I'm going to lead this country's revival. As a veteran of the Iraq War and in the Navy, I will always put service above self as president. As the father of 3 young kids, I'm going to ensure that this country is left to the next generation in better shape than we found it.
Difficult.
And as the governor of Florida, I delivered on all my promises.
Such an ass.
You can trust me to deliver for you as the president of the United
Give
States.
us that
I am
awkward smile.
asking for
Please
your
tell me
vote.
they haven't trained that out of
I'll be
him.
a nominee that will be able to win the election. I will be a leader you can be proud of.
We'll
and
do it
as your
together,
president, I will not let you down. God bless you.
Governor DeSantis, thank you.
Every time! Every time! You see that?
That is going to conclude our debate. The next line says that the audience can hold their applause. That didn't work out. But anyway, for just a few more seconds, I'll ask you to just hold the applause. On behalf of my fellow moderators, I want to thank the candidates for their time and for this spirited debate. Really good, deep conversation.
Really good, deep, bigoted ranting from all these monsters. Folks, thank you so much for joining me tonight. I'm sorry I don't have time to read comments because Left Past 10 starts in 60 seconds, theoretically. Talk to you then. See you then.